Here we go. We are live. Paolo's going to be a few minutes late tonight. And
Excellent.
right
How
now,
are you doing, sir?
Wilson and I are swapping art supplies stories.
Yes,
So
I'm also eating my dinner. So if I duck away, it's just because I'm trying to eat some tacos. So please forgive me for my rudeness, but it's like it's the only time I have to eat.
But first of all, Wilson was just telling me his art supplies are a little unorganized at times. Mine are very organized, so that's what makes this story very funny. Matter of fact, during my barbecue last Saturday, one of my friends came over and was like, "Wow, it's like an art supply store in here." That's like because I got all sorts of art supplies. So, good evening, Comic Crack. It's good evening, Mind the Comics. So here I was just buying. I have on my desktop. Let me see if I can tip this down. See that green right there?
Yep.
That's a cutting mat. You know,
Mhm.
self-healing cutting mats, they're called. Good evening, Tit Goblin.
Hello, Tit
And
Goblin.
I've had my whole desk surfaced with one of those since the early 90s when I got this desk, the same one. So I finally had to replace it this year. It was kind of warped after, it lasted, what is that, 30 years. But the company who made it is out of business, Alvin.
Hmm.
So it took me months to find one the right size that I could buy. But I also, we used to, here's one. This is the size we used to use at Marvel. This is 11 by 17. This is what we used to cut out the balloons when we were doing it by hand. Good evening, sleepy reader. Paolo's going to be a few minutes late tonight. He just IM'd us, so he'll be here too. So I decided I wanted one of these too because I I had my Marvel one for years. Because sometimes when I'm cutting a lot, I don't want to cut on my desk surface. I'll cut on one of these. Sometime, I don't know how long ago it was. I always kept my cutting mat in the same place. Like I said, I'm very organized.
Hmm.
But I hadn't used that 11 by 17 one in a few years. And I'm like, let me move this, let me tuck this away to some other place. Okay. Cut to about 2 years ago. I'm like, let me get that. I want to use that cutting mat again. Let me pull it out. I could not find it. I kept it in the same place for 20 years. I moved it and then I couldn't find it. Nowhere could I find it. And I'm like, look, I searched all over, could not find it. Finally, 2 years goes by, and I'm like, because it wasn't high priority. I just wanted it. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna buy one. I'm gonna buy a new one. They're only about $20. Even though Alvin doesn't make them anymore, it's not as good as that one.
Right.
So I was like, watch, as soon as I buy it, I'm gonna find the other one. And sure enough, I buy it, I get it, and I'm like, where should I keep this? I'm like, why don't I keep it right down here on the edge of my console TV? And as I put it there, what do I knock over? The old one. I'm
Hmm.
like, filth, flarn, filth, flarn. It was right where I put this one, except it was like tucked over more, so I never saw it as I was searching for it for ages. But I was just like, the moment I get a new one, the old one pops up.
Hmm.
This one might be a little petrified, though. I'm not even sure. This is one of the ones that's supposed to go on light tables too. It's translucent.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's this color. Usually they're black or green. And this one's good. They make them now more for crafting than for artists.
Yeah.
You'll find them for That's why it's got all these. These are all crafting lines on the back.
Hmm.
And they don't self heal. They don't have as many layers as they used to. They don't self heal as well as they. You probably can't see it on here, but the one is about 2 millimeters, and the other is about 4 millimeters. The old one, so it's thicker. Which is why I didn't want to cut on the one. I put the nice cutting mat here. I try to avoid cutting on it too much
Right.
because it just doesn't self heal as good as the old ones. But the
Mhm.
old one, I cut on the same. It's got a grid all over it, as you can see here. They all have grids on them. So I would always kind of like whenever I was cutting a piece of paper, like I always cut my 6x9 pieces of paper. Yep, you find it as soon as you. I cut my 9x12 paper into 6x9 paper, and I always put it kind of in the middle. After doing 20, 30 years of cuts on that middle one, I had a trough in the middle of my
Right.
and I actually tried turning it upside down because I was like, you know what? I I really only use the bottom half of my drawing table. It's 36 inches tall or so. I really only use the bottom half. So I'm like, if I flip it around, that side's probably fine. And I did, except that's the half of the drawing table that gets the direct sunlight. So
Oh,
you couldn't really tell because I'm never on that top part, but it was a little bit warped, which was okay until I went to put a ruler down on it and it would spin because it was warped. There was a little, it was only like a 16th of an inch or from a 16th to an eighth of an inch warped, but it was still, I'm like, oh, I got to get a new
yeah.
one. I go through a big one every 2 years, cut a lot of cardboard, and it's always expensive. And how I get them, yeah, the quilting ones just aren't as good as the one that lasted me 30 years, the Alvin one. And I cut on that one a lot.
Yeah, the one that I have is not Alvin, um, but
This is
I've
the old
had it
one for the
for
cushion to the new
years.
one. Yeah.
It's
What is it?
Ucheda?
Yeah, I don't think this old one from Marvel is. Oh yeah, that looks like one of the old Marvel ones too, because it's got the big inch. I notice
Yeah.
all the old ones have tri-scale model shops. Yeah, but these ones used to be made for artists, specifically production artists, to
Yeah, because
cut
we were
on.
always cutting with the X-Acto knives
You're
and what
always
have
cutting
you.
with the exact. So there's like 5 layers. Who made this one? I don't even. Cutting mat Uchida, translucent. So
Okay, so that's the same company that makes mine.
yeah, so Marvel must have got all Uchi.
Yeah.
The old ones all have like 1 inch squares on them. The newer ones
Hmm.
have like quarter-inch squares, but little dots on them too. But yeah, they just don't make them that way. And there's not production artists anymore.
Yeah, because everything
So
went
there's no
over
need
to.
who cut on mats. So there's no real need to make them like they use. Hobbyists don't cut nearly as much. Like this one, you can see you can see how battered this is, but it's the surface, and you can see how all those probably can't see all these lines are faded in here from all the cuts that were made on it. But it's still the surface is still fine. The surface is still smooth. There's like no ruts in it or anything.
Yeah.
That's how well these were made.
Yeah, so like most of the supplies that I have, like I know where everything is, but it was just that one jar of liquid frisk, I believe it's
Liquid
called.
frisket,
Liquid frisket. And I only use it when I do sketch cards. But it's
right?
been at least 2 years since I did
Yeah,
a set of sketch cards. And mostly everything I have them in drawers and stuff like that. Like I mentioned before we went on, my erasers and where I keep those.
hmm
But the stuff that are in jars, they're usually all kept in the same area. It's
right.
always at that I can grab it when I need it type of thing. And I went to
hmm
go grab it. It's like, why isn't it there anymore? But again, I haven't used it in 2 years. And it's possible that I had ran out when I did my last set of cards. And it was like, oh, that's something I have to pick up again. But since I didn't do that type of work, I didn't have to get it. And then, as I mentioned before, it's like, and then there are some things that I don't know that's been sitting there for so long that it just goes bad. And in my mind, it's like I don't think of art supplies going bad because every time I had
Some
to
of them
open it and
do.
use it, I would use it. But if there is something that I have bought and have not used, because sometimes you'll buy something and use it
Oh,
only once,
right,
you
right.
know, to try it out and test it out. And it's like, oh, this is not something I'll ever use. But every once in a while, it's like, oh, I know where this box is. Like I have a box of watercolors.
Right.
Never used them. And I decided since I was doing these cards and they had to have a space background, like I'll do it in watercolor. And I attempted it and realized I cannot do it in watercolors because the card stock
Yeah.
does
Not
not take to water. It
watercolor
ended
is
up
wet.
it ended up warping and the colors weren't mixing well. And it's like I'm going to have to try to do a space design with markers. And the beautiful thing about technology today is I was able to go onto YouTube
Right.
and see how someone's tackling making space with watercolors. And it's like,
Yep.
okay, that's how I do it with watercolors. All right, someone has to do it with markers. So I eventually found that someone was doing it with markers. And it's like, aha, okay. Watched a 10-minute video on that, figured it out, did a test sheet. It's like, oh, I know where this is going. I can do this. This is fairly because I've done markers for years. I've colored comic books for years. And it's like, oh, it's just this way of that technique and then just turn it into what I need to make space. And then because I did not have the liquid frisket, it's like, okay, I'm going to have to do it the opposite way that I normally would do space
Right.
with now markers and coloring. And then at the end, I sprinkle the stars on with the toothbrush
Toothbrush.
with the toothbrush. And it's like, all
No
right,
toothbrush method.
I could just do it that method. And it's like, all right. So it's basically taking all the skills that I've learned in one aspect to do it. It's like, okay, now I just got to move it on to this one and just basically just change the layering system
Yeah.
on that to get the effect that I want. And it came out pretty well. So it's like I was happy with it. And it's like, all right, there's another thing to add to the skill set later on, where because I do have a bunch of cards that I have sitting there that I've been wanting to do for myself anyway, and this would just add to it.
Right. See, I miss drafting in well-stocked stationery stores. Online isn't the same as being in the store browsing. Yeah, that's true. I found 90% of the stuff I like through impulse browsing. Yeah, that is true. I miss a good art supply store. I haven't
Yeah,
the,
because you
the
go in for
last one
one
I was
thing.
the last good art supply store I was to, probably there's a Dick Blick in Jersey that's pretty good. There's also one in Midtown Manhattan. But you can imagine what the prices of art supplies in Midtown Manhattan are. Whatever you imagine, double it. It's like, holy cow.
Even with my professor's discount card,
Yeah, yeah,
and I don't
no.
even know if they still even have that because this was back when it wasn't Dick Blick yet. It was
Ah,
the art store. It was just
okay.
called the art store. It was on Bond
All right.
in the village. It eventually was bought out by Dick Blick.
This
But
this one is on like, I don't even know, 18th Street and 7th Avenue or something like that, or 6th or
oh,
5th
okay.
Ave. It's and it's huge. It's like the lease there must be super expensive.
Oh, I
It's
would
a
imagine
huge
so.
art supply store.
Hmm.
But here, I was speaking of art supplies. Have you ever seen pan pastels?
I've heard of them. I don't think I've used them.
I bought some 5 6 years ago because they were new then. I'd never really used them or seen them, so I bought like a starter set of like 12 colors. It's like pastel dust. It's like you take a stick pastel and you grind it into dust and you put it in like a flat pan, like this mint container. It's like filled with pastel dust. And you're supposed to use like what are those stabilos, those rubbing sticks, or a Q-tip, or like a rubber sponge, and draw with it. I tried it like once or twice, and it just wasn't for me. It's just been sitting over there ever since.
I have a pastel story.
But then I was just watching a TikTok, and a guy is drawing with what looked like charcoal to me and a palette knife. He was like rubbing the palette knife. And I realized he's drawing in a black pan pastel. He was like dipping the palette knife in the powder and rubbing the powder on the page and drawing that way. I was like, that is crazy. I'll have to try that.
Yeah. I never liked working with pastels. The funny thing with pastels, my pastel story is that being a artist as a kid, family members would always give me art supplies,
Right.
birthdays, what have you. The thing is that I would always get the same art supplies, and I would always get pastels. And there was one time I think I had maybe racked up to 7 boxes of pastels that I never used because there was no real opportunity. I didn't like them. I didn't like getting my hands dirty. It's different than using
Pastels are a
chalk.
lot messier than you think they are
Yes, and they
because
break easily.
they make colored dust everywhere. And first of all, the pastels for kids are terrible.
Yes.
Are absolutely terrible. If you were to get a real artist pastel, it's such a different experience than one of those kid pastels. Not saying I'm a big pastel fan. I've used them a little bit, but it's just completely different because they're soft and creamy and they come right off
Mhm.
on the paper, as opposed to those kids pastels, which are like rocks. You
Yeah.
scrub the paper with a rock and it tears the paper and it barely comes off the pastel stick and it's trouble.
Yep, they break easily,
Yeah,
and
they're
eventually
brittle.
I eventually got rid of them all because I never got to use them.
Uh, there are a ton of art supply stores in Lima, Peru, and they carry all cheaper Faber, Strathmore, Zig, etc. I bought a ton of pens before I moved back to the States. Yeah, I don't blame you. I actually refill my pens. Any pen that you can take the back off of, um, any little black marker that you can take the back off of and get to the sponge, you can refill with Koh-i-Noor drawing ink, which is the
Okay.
best. You can refill it with any ink, but the
Right.
Koh-i-Noor Rapidograph ink is best because it's made for technical pens, so it flows better.
Right.
But I refill all my sign pens. I refill any pen I can. I refill any pen I can get to the sponge on. Like I love these fat. What are these Rotring ones? But there's no sponge in this. It's this
I
reservoir that you can't get to.
right.
But like these ones right here. This I love these ones. This is a big moist tip Neo Pico Line 2 and it's got this big, thick tip. And though you can't get to the sponge, there's a little trough in the tip where you can dip ink into and it refills the sponge.
Oh, okay.
So I use these all the time. I use these until I destroy the tip and then open a new one.
Yeah, I tend to do the same thing because I used, especially for the sketch cards, like the ones of my favorite are the ones with the brush tip. Because I
Yeah,
could really get some detail, especially doing hair, because it's almost like using a brush in general, but being that small, and I do like being able to refill them because I was watching TikTok from the YouTube from Inker, I think it's Philip Moy,
okay,
and he talked about refilling his because again, once you get it open, you could get to the sponge, and it's like
right.
that saves so much money in
Yeah,
general because again, sometimes you don't wear the tip down.
yeah,
Some markers you do, some you don't. Where what I would do is I would put tape on the markers. There's like this is almost going,
right.
but I could still get a good effect from it. I could get a
Yeah,
dry brush effect from it, especially on doing it for rocks or textures and stuff like
yeah.
that. It's like I use it until that pen cannot support any more ink at all. And again, finding out that you can refill them. And again, it's just finding the right ink to refill them with.
I used to use Barrel Prismacolors in the 80s. I think I still have some out in my I still have my old ones out in the garage
I
that
have to.
are still have
I,
because you had two choices. Like when I went to college in 84, 85, 86. That's when I was using them. You had either those or the char pack markers or the art design markers. Those were your three choices. And the Prismacolors were water based and the other two were alcohol based. I used to like the water based ones in the Barrel Prisma, and it's funny because I from I didn't use markers at all from like I used them in the 80s, and then I didn't buy I didn't use them at all till like 2010. I decided I wanted to use them again and come up with sort of a finished marker technique. And that's when I started using the Copics. So, but yeah, I remember those well. Used to use them back in my commercial art college days.
I'm almost sure I used them in high school because that's what we had at the high school of art and design.
Hmm. I
And then
started.
I didn't use any markers in college, although we did have a guest teacher that came in showing what marker renderings could be, and it was
Yeah.
amazing on how he was working on these mechanicals, making the items look like
Oh
they're
yeah.
true, and it's like that's amazing. And then I didn't start using markers again until I was at Marvel.
Some of those admin comp artists really could use
Yeah.
markers. Ooh. And they all used they're still around, the Charpak design. They're the smelliest markers ever, the alcohol ones. I have
Mhm.
one of them here. What are they? They're these ones. Um, Charpak. These are what all the ad design guys always used.
Yep.
Big. Matter of fact, I saw a video of a guy using these just a few years ago, like watercolors. He had like the marker paper. He'd squirt down alcohol. He'd wet them. He got all these techniques with these markers. I was like, that is crazy. I've never seen anything like it.
Hmm.
Started to refill my paint pens too. Watered down acrylic in a paint pen does right, makes the cost justify. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I haven't used paint pens much, but that's a good idea. I I don't know what happened, but the old barrels were colored pencils like pastels, insane colors and saturation, very soft. The new ones, I used to have one of those old boxes of barrels. I used them a bit in school, but I was never a big colored pencil guy. In Canada, we grew up with really high pigment, soft colored pencils, like called Laurentian. They also bought out by Prismacolor, and the quality changed for the worse. Isn't that always the story? Matter of fact, I have like 3 or 4 sets of colored pencils that I bought over the years that I just never use. The best colored pencil technique I ever saw and ever used, matter of fact, I can't remember who it was used to do it in comics, is you'd get a gray colored pencil paper. That way you can work your highlights up and work your shadows down. And some people did some real, that's the best stuff I saw was using that technique on gray paper.
I know.
That, that was pretty
I don't
cool.
know if both of them, or at least one of them, the Kubert brothers, used to turn in some artwork with where they were using colored pencils,
Yeah,
and
there
they
was,
would do it on different color paper. I mean,
yeah.
I remember one of them was done like on a cardboard, just because of the
Ah.
weird techniques that they were doing.
Let me bring out one of this week's comics just for the heck of it. Speaking of weird art, Liam Sharp's Starhenge #2.
Okay.
This one's on my pull list now. This is the one I said reminded me a little of Moon Shadow. Not the subject matter, just kind of the way it's done. Sort of there's this sort of lyrical writing that's telling a few different stories that don't all quite tie together yet. I have no idea what technique he's using here. I don't know if it's, yeah, that looks digital.
I
The
think
only
he's
way you can
all
tell,
digital.
what was that?
I think he's all digital nowadays. Or he's multimedia and then scans it in and then does digital over it.
Okay.
It's
The
hard to
only way
tell.
I can tell is the white highlights. The computers are so good at um, duplicating natural media, and some guys are so good with it that it's not always easy to tell, except for how white the whites get. But just a nice little. It's like there's one story going on with this guy right here and his new girlfriend, and they're sort of in the modern day talking about stuff. And then we've got another story where this guy from the future was just sent to the past to be Merlin and build Stonehenge. and we get quotes from Geoffrey of Monmouth, who was one of the first guys to write down some Arthur stories. Then we get, who is this? Is this his pages 2, 3, and 4 by Matilda McCormick Sharp? I don't know if that's his wife, but we get like 2 pages of this, I guess his wife drawing in this sort of cute cartoony style. That was like another story. So there's like these 2 or 3 narratives going on, and they really haven't, and there's kind of something, and there, a lot of them are really kind of light and mysterious. This is where it's reminding of Moon Shadow. But there's something dark going on in the background, but we really don't know what the dark is yet. Except the dark takes place way in the future, where the humans are fighting these robots or something, and the robots are winning. What that has to do with all the other stories, I'm not sure. But it's a fun ride. It's actually a good read. This is one of the, I always say, sometimes there are books I'm surprised I like, and this is one of them, just because I've never read anything by Liam Sharp, and he's kind of a mainstream guy. So but this is a real indie book. Moon Shadow is a great read. Are you guys using actual brush and ink or synthetic brushes like Ziggs? I bought several Ziggs in Peru, and I love them. Tips don't last like Sable, but you get some mileage out of them. I mostly use Winsor Newton Series 7 brushes still.
That's what I still use.
But I don't always use them. In recent years, I've been also getting some synthetic brushes, which also don't. I thought the synthetic brushes would last longer. The synthetic brushes are better than they used to be. But I find I was reading something. It was Daniel Clowes wrote. In one of the books, I forget which book it was I was reading by Daniel Clowes, but there was a little interview with him in it. And one of the things he said stuck with me. He said, I used to always use a Winsor Newton Series 7 brush without fail, he said. And he said, but over the years, I got so good with a brush that I don't always need that good a brush. So he's like, so sometimes I use synthetic brushes because I'm good with a brush now, so I don't need the best brush around. And I was like, you know what? I feel that I've been working ink for so long that I don't need a Winsor Newton Series 7 all the time. Sometimes I can get a lesser brush and do just as well with it. If I'm doing something, and sometimes, like, I developed a whole style using my busted brushes, which is a brush that doesn't have a tip anymore. That's my monster, like my Series 7s that don't hold a tip anymore. Started working on a technique using those just because, but it took me 20, 25 years to start doing that.
Yeah, I still use the Series 7s that I got from Marvel.
I
had bought, and again, every time I went to an art supply store, I was always pick up something because I always wanted to make sure I always had a brush for whites. Because again, sketch cards, I would be doing highlights and stuff like that. I do get cheap brushes to have when I'm doing models and stuff like that, where I'm doing dry brushing on things that I know I'm going to abuse the brush pretty much. But for comic book inking, I still have my original Series 7s because right after I used them, I would clean them and make sure.
Yeah, you must not use them that much because they
That's the thing. I don't use them as much because most of the pen and ink stuff I'm doing is sketch card related.
Yeah.
And I've been mostly doing those with pens. And then I would only do the large black areas, but I'm even switching to markers to do that as well.
Yeah, if you're using a Series 7 brush every day, it's gonna last you a year at the most.
Yeah, I don't
Some
use
of
it
them
every
just
day.
months. But what's funny though is if you don't use, I always keep my watercolor and my ink brushes separate. Not that I do a ton of watercoloring anymore. I used to do gouache, but if it doesn't touch ink, it'll last you a lifetime. Soon as you dip it in ink, the clock is ticking.
Right.
That's just the way, because the varnish in the India ink destroys the glue and the bristle, is what I'm told.
Right.
So I tried all through the 90s to make to make them last as long as I could. There's no way. Paulo is here.
Hey guys, what's up?
Good
Hey,
evening.
Paulo, how you doing?
Comic Crack's only new comic day pickup was the Black Sod volume. Loved it. I have not read that one. Starhenge reminded me a bit of old heavy metal. I never picked up 2. I need to reread 1. It never sunk in, and I was in the wrong. Yeah, that happens. That's why I read everything twice, because I know my mood can. I know when I read a comic and I'm like, that sometimes it's just my mood. And how are you doing tonight, Paulo?
I had a late dinner, so
What'd you have for dinner?
lots and lots of beef.
Okay. Wilson is eating tacos right now. He got his dinner delivered. Good evening.
Right before we went on air.
Right before we went on air.
Yeah, but also a live concert. I had a live concert during the meal.
Mm-hmm. Cool. A live concert.
Mm-hmm.
One of the topics I have for tonight is I printed it out so I could read it. An email from Chris Geruso last week saying sorry he hasn't been around, but he says, a guy emailed me this week who said he bought Amazing Fantasy 15 brand new off the rack. I asked him what he remembers about buying it and reading it. Was it just another comic? Was it an instant game changer? Here's what he wrote back. So here is an actual little piece from somebody who bought Amazing Fantasy 15 right off the rack. I thought this was interesting. He says, I was around 12 at the time and was pretty into comics, but not totally. Since we had no phones or computers to play with, there was going to the movies, playing baseball and football, going on bike rides, hiking, etc. So comics weren't a huge deal, but it was definitely something I looked forward to each week. But even at 10 and 12 cents, I couldn't buy every comic I wanted. By the time I bought Amazing Fantasy 15, I'd been buying seriously for about 2 years. So I guess he was 10 when he started buying seriously, which is right about the age I was.
Yeah, same here.
Where am I? Almost no comics remained from his early childhood, he says. And I was mostly buying DC, but then I started buying Marvels as well with FF2 and Amazing Adult Fantasy. I really liked Stan Lee's personal touches in his announcements and letter columns. It made me feel like I was part of the family, and I obviously wasn't alone. So I think it was the comic covers and logos that really grabbed me. Pre-FF, it was DC's Brave and the Bold and Showcase that I looked for a lot. And of course, all the spin-offs from those. I started buying DC regularly in 1960 and loved Kubert's Hawkman covers. And the Atom covers, and well, most of those Tryout Mag covers. I found that interesting. He liked the Showcase and all those other ones. Then Marvel hit, and it was the same but maybe better. That summer of '62, and Marvel started adding superheroes to its monster books. And by some miracle, I noticed, because I hadn't been buying any of the Atlas monster books until the superheroes hit. So I had to get all those and probably some other Marvels. So I had to cut back on DCs. I find that interesting. He calls it a miracle that he noticed the Marvel book. So he obviously wasn't looking for them.
Right.
But the covers and the logos must have caught his eye at first. And then he liked, of course, the comics. Plus, I still needed money to go to the show, popcorn, candy, baseball cards, even though they were only 5 cents. So that's why he had to cut back on his DCs to buy Marvels. All this to show that I was so primed to get any new hero books by Marvel. And then one day at the Owl Rexel Drugs on the corner just up from my house, where I bought 99% of my comics, there on the spinner rack was something called Amazing Fantasy. You could only see about half the cover, so I took one out and it looked like a really cool character. But it was weird that it was number 15. Had I missed the other one somehow? The logo was totally different from Amazing Adult Fantasy. But in any case, of course, I bought it. I find that interesting too. Since they changed the title on, he was like, where are the other 14 issues?
Right.
Even though he was buying, he said Amazing Adult Fantasy. But this one was so different. He was like, what happened? He didn't even notice that it was a continuation. I find that interesting.
I like that he pointed out the logo
Yeah.
as something. So that's
Right.
at that time that's either Joe Rosas or Artie Semix doing those
Joe
logos, I
Rosen.
believe. Joe Rosen. So I believe
Joe
those.
Rostis worked with us in the bullpen.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah. He's a
And
colorist in the 90s.
oh, okay. So those were the guys that were doing the lettering back then. On those where the lettering, where the logos completely different than the DC logos.
Yeah.
Because are they bright, open colored logos?
Yeah, I'd have to compare them. I
have not looked at them in a while, so that might be the other thing too. Also, he mentioned about the new superheroes.
Right.
And that's something that I always had wondered, is because the DC heroes are already out 25 years by the time Marvel's first books come out. Well, of the superhero genre. Is it that this 10-year-old is looking and he's seeing superheroes for him?
He's 12 now. Yeah, that could be
it. 12. So all the other superheroes existed before he was born. And it's like, that's why I think I have a connection with Venom, because he's the new superhero
and
that
need
came
the human
in.
fly.
Yeah. The human fly was already around. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the Spider-Man fly. There's also one that's green and yellow called the fly. So it's like, by the time Venom comes out, it's like, that's a new character. That's a new villain. And to me, that was exciting at that time. Because, Spider-Man was already out for years, but because I watched him as a cartoon show beforehand, I connected that way, where it didn't feel like he's an old character. So I'm wondering if that
I was okay with all the old characters when I was buying in the mid 70s, but it was still fun to get a new one.
Right.
I've often thought in a wistful way of coulda shoulda that there were about a dozen of those that I could have bought for a little more than $1, but there was no collector mentality back then at all, at least not for me. I mean, I was a collector, but in the purest sense, just to collect, not for any possible future value. So I would imagine most, 12-year-olds weren't thinking I should buy all these copies of Amazing Fantasy 15. It'll be worth $1 million in the future. You had to wait a few decades for 12-year-olds to think that. So yes, I guess it did jump out at me, but a lot of others did as well. I had no idea of it being a game changer. So that's interesting. He had no idea of it being a game changer. Though I knew that it, along with the FF and the other heroes in the X-Monster books, were very special and a whole lot of fun to read. A complete change from DC, and I realized it, but I still liked and bought my DCs.
Right.
But I find that interesting too. He liked them, knew they were different, didn't think they were a game changer. But why would you think that when you're 12 buying comics? And it also didn't make him stop buying the DCs that he loved already. But he did like them. Plus, I recognized Ditko's art that I liked in the backups in the Monster comics and also from the Charltons that I had bought. So that made it even more special. So he especially liked Amazing Fantasy 15 because he recognized the Ditko art. In those days, my favorite artists, that is, those that I could recognize from their style, were Kirby, Ditko, Kane, Kubert, and Don Heck. Oh, I just wanted to finish off by saying the covers of those days stay with me like no others of the later comics. I can still look at those covers of a bygone youth and they still hit me like a punch. I think a lot of covers of our youth do that, but
Yeah, I and some of the books were not that great, but I still remember some covers, and it's like
yeah,
there's a fondness of seeing it.
you're good.
I think it's like that with a lot of Mike Zeck covers for me.
One of my
G.I.
favorite,
Joe covers.
one of the covers I showed on this week, I don't have it out, and I was out all last week on my printer, was a Ron Wilson, Bob Layton, Captain America country cover. It was a close up of Cap, like from Cap, like 230, of Cap holding up his shield, his teeth gritted, crunched up against the wall as the Hulk is punching his shield. Still not a great comic. Still love that cover.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've had this argument with newer fans, and especially when it comes to those themed variants that have nothing to do with the story, like when they did the Deadpool variants,
Right.
even though there's no Deadpool in the story, because that's false advertising.
Yeah.
The cover is meant to entice you to buy what's inside. Mm-hmm. But if what's on the cover is not inside,
right,
then it enticed you in the wrong way. You're not supposed to collect covers.
Right.
All of the premise has always been put the cover out there so that the cover is attractive and describes what's inside. And so yeah, all of those covers, they were designed to get your attention. That's why they still stay with you.
They're just now covers are trading cards a lot. But let me inform Tim. This was from Chris Geruso, who's been on this show sometimes. And since for the last month, we've been discussing sort of the origins of Marvel Comics in the early 60s and how it could exist and how it ever got popular. Chris got an email from a guy who happened to buy Amazing Fantasy 15 off the stands. So Chris, in the spirit of our talking about this, asked the guy his experience. And this was, I don't even know the guy's name. This was that guy's experience of buying Amazing Fantasy 15 off the stands and what it meant to him. So I thought that was really, because like we've just been trying to figure out exactly what made Marvel, because there's all these, strange coincidences and things that led to Marvel being, so popular. And it's interesting trying to figure out exactly what it was. No problem. And also along that line, my barbecue was last weekend, and Walter Simonson is a friend of mine. He's local, so he stopped by for a little while. So I got to ask him if he bought any of these off the stands. And it turns out he said he was a little too old to buy because he was born in 47. So I think he said he was 16 when the first Marvels came out. So that he was just a little too old to get them. I think you would probably have to be around 10, 12 to 14. But he was one of the proverbial college kids who found Marvel really cool. So when he was about, when he's off at college, so he's about 18, that's when he discovered Marvel in like 1964, I think it was, he said. And what was really interesting, too, was he told me, I think he went to his first college was Amherst College. He said it was a college town he was in. And there were like two big colleges on either end of the town. And when he first got there, he couldn't find any Marvel comics. He didn't know. There was just DC. And then he discovered, I think he said there was the comics came into the local stores on Tuesdays. And if you didn't get to the store by Tuesday at, say, 8 p.m., you didn't get any Marvel comics. They were sold out by the day they came out that evening. And I was like, wow, I'd never heard that, especially because it's a college town. So I guess all the college kids were kind of getting into Marvel, just like he was. So that was an interesting first-hand account I liked, too. Stoned out of my mind and sucked into the world of Doctor Strange. Oh, yeah. Simonson's covers for recent Rocketeer Hollywood are great. Unfortunately, the interior art does not match. Oh, yeah. Let's face it, the red Spider-Man cover first appeared is truly beautiful and eye-catching. He just had to buy it. I told, that caught his eye. That's a good, I guess.
I still think that the Ditko cover they didn't publish was better than the Jack Kirby one.
I think the Jack Kirby one may be more eye-catching. I don't know. It's a tough call.
It is a very tough call.
Because I like both of them.
Yeah.
But I think it's so hard to say in retrospect. Because that Kirby cover is so famous and embedded in all our minds.
I think the Kirby cover
one is a little refreshing. No way, Paulo, says Graphic Man.
The Kirby one is, I think it's a cleaner, easier look.
Yeah, I think it's easier to grasp. So therefore, it may have been better for a first issue.
The Ditko cover is very busy.
Yeah,
it's a very busy cover, exciting cover, but it might have been too exciting for that first appearance.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I mean, and also, I have a hard time judging just because it's like, I've lived with that Kirby cover my whole life, just about.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ditko cover is kind of brand new to me in comparison. And I like brand new. So it could just be the novelty of it that makes me like it better. And the other one, I just can't make that judgment.
Right.
I think my judgment is skewed no matter what.
Have you ever noticed that
it's got to go Kirby, but it's a legitimate argument. I have no problem with anyone liking the other one.
Kirby makes Spider-Man more muscular in that cover, and then we have years of Ditko, and although Romita does prettify Peter, Spider-Man still stays nimble. And the way that Kirby draws Spider-Man in that cover only came back when John Byrne was drawing Marvel Team Up.
Mm-hmm.
Because John Byrne has a tendency to make all the characters look muscular as well, even when they're not supposed to be.
That's another thing that clouds my judgment, is that Ditko Spider-Man is my favorite Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
So all that stuff you say about the Kirby cover is right. It makes me like the Ditko one, but I still don't know, never having seen any of it before, which I would have liked better. Mind the Comics likes Ditko better. The Ditko cover is interesting at best, but the Kirby cover is dynamic. But interesting thing about the early superhero days at Marvel, the X-Men and the Fantastic Four had their first appearances in their own books, while Spidey's first appearance was AF-15 and Thor Journey. Yeah, that's because they were putting out all those short stories in those. That they could. Once again, when we were talking about the incredible coincidences that made Marvel Comics happen, one of them was that they could only publish 8 books. Martin Goodman couldn't do his usual flood the stuff, and they debuted books with short stories. So that's another one of the strange coincidences happenings that made
by that time they had 11. Because
it went from 8 to 12 at one point, right? And then I think Goodman all snuck some in there sometimes.
The people talk about the Sweet 16, but he never had a limit of 16 titles. He had a limit of 8 per month. That had to be renegotiated because a few titles went monthly after that. But then it kind of stayed on the 11 for a few years. I'm not sure that the annuals counted because, but it stayed on 11 for a few years. That's why when the superheroes started multiplying, they still had to go on split titles. But by that time, they were staying on 11. Goodman wanted to sell the company, and finding a new owner who had a distributor finally allowed him to get out of that in 1968. But it went from 8 to 11 in about 3 years, and after that, it stayed for the next 5.
Something about Kirby's Spider-Man cover, having us look up at Spider-Man, just made me feel like how you would see him for the first time if you saw him in real life. Yeah, I can understand that. It's damn near impossible to beat Kirby for dynamics. That is true too. But Ditko had his own thing, Ditko had his own thing going with his weird, creepy. I could understand why Stan Lee went with the Kirby cover, but I'm not sure if I like it better. But like I said, I'm so caught up in it. I
being
couldn't decide.
a huge Spider-Man fan, I don't see that as a cover working. But again, it's that skew of knowing that cover and the history of it and it being there for so long is hard for me to see how it could work with the Ditko cover. And I don't think I'm a huge Ditko fan. I'm more of a Romita Spider-Man fan anyway.
Oh, I'm a Ditko fan.
Yeah, I didn't appreciate Ditko until I was older. When I was a kid, it was a Romita.
I didn't appreciate Spider-Man at all until I read the Ditko ones finally in those pocketbook editions.
Okay, I read them in the Marvel Tales editions, and that's where it's like, oh, this is interesting.
Ed Piskor tells a story about a senior in line at a signing, and Ed thought he was going to get into the early days story, and the old man said, I've been collecting for a long time, the death of Superman.
You young whippersnapper.
But that's having an anniversary now, too.
I'm guessing that this guy would have noticed the Ditko cover since Ditko was one of his favorites. So.
Yeah.
I'm a pre-code horror Ditko fan. Yeah, I got it when they when I think it was Fantagraphics reprinted some of that pre-code horror Ditko. I really enjoyed it.
But there isn't that much pre-code Ditko. When it started working, 53?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot. Ditko's guy's suit is very good. He's good at the suits. So mind the comics likes him.
Yeah, Ditko had more characters wear suits than Kirby. Although both of them had this weird notion that in 1962 teenagers would be wearing ties.
All right, let's take a break from the past for a minute, and I'll show you a present comic, Samurai Doggy, an Aftershock comic. And I've been staying away from the Aftershock comics because they're $5. This one is 48 pages for $5. And Samurai Doggy just reminded me of Usagi Yojimbo. So I figured, what the heck? I opened it up. I kind of like, and also what sold it to me was there's a map in the back. I'm a sucker for maps. I like maps of worlds. And it's about anthropomorphic animals versus robots, I think. Even with 48 pages, there wasn't a huge taste of the world. There was a lot of this guy wandering. It did remind me of Usagi, but the storytelling wasn't nearly as good. It's very Japanese manga influenced. Who's doing it? Hold on. It's by Chris Tex is the writer, and Santos is the artist, colorer, letterer. Whoever Santos is, with 2 T's. My one complaint is it was too Japanese manga-ish for me, in that I find, like, even in my favorite manga, All You Need Is Kill, I find sometimes the action scenes are just too blurry and indistinct for me. They've got sort of this style of doing things with lots of motion and blurs, and I don't particularly like that storytelling trope or whatever it is. And he's doing some of that in here. So it's like the scenes that are kind of supposed to be, the action scenes that are supposed to be most impactful, don't have a lot of impact on me. But otherwise, I liked it. So, but Samurai Doggy, Aftershock Comics, a new one out this past week. Choice pre-code. Yeah, Ditko was choice pre-code. That same dog cover is super cool. I might pick it up. Yeah, it's good. I think I'm going to get another issue of it. I hope it's 48 pages again for $5, but who knows? And I was trying to find out how many issues it's going to go, but because I don't think the Aftershock ones are ongoing. But I wasn't able to find out. Oh, here's one. that comes with a TikTok story. The New Parker Girls by Terry Moore, who's one of Black and White, one of my favorites. I buy everything he does. And the Parker Girls are his first book he did all through the 90s, Strangers in Paradise. One of the stars of it was this woman Kachu. And before Strangers in Paradise, she used to belong to the Parker Girls, who were like this all-female worldwide spy organization thing. There were a bunch of female James Bondses doing work for whoever, and they were kind of broken up by the time Strangers in Paradise came around, but they still had some parts to play in the Strangers in Paradise story. But now we're getting a story with all the Tambi is like they had this really big buff Parker girl. But now we're going to switch the story to me looking at TikToks. Gonna have to finish listening later. Have a great night. Have a great night too, Tim.
Take care, Tim.
I'd say I've always noticed certain artists just couldn't nail certain characters. I never thought Kirby had a handle on Spider-Man he's famous for not having a handle on Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been watching a bunch of TikToks lately, getting art tips and all sorts of stuff. But I was watching this one. I think there were two TikToks, which were from young women who were asking the question, should I hit on this guy? They're asking the question in general. Do guys get hit on in general? Do strange women come up and hit on guys? And almost every answer was no, it rarely happens, which is my experience too. Guys just rarely get hit on. And at least half the guys said, some guys were saying, if you get hit on, if the guy's flabbergasted, it's because it never happens. But at least half the guys, and this is my experience too, say, if and this only happens like in Manhattan. No one's coming to my front door and hitting them, It only happens when I'm out in Manhattan, or it used to, not that I'm an old guy. Now that I'm an old guy, it never happens. When some attractive woman comes up to you in Manhattan and starts talking to you, what's the first thing you do? You start looking for what the scam is, what they're selling. And this is what at least half the guys said. They're like, if some woman comes up to me and starts talking to me, I'm wondering what she's selling. I'm wondering what the scam is. Because that's usually when strange women talk to men, is when they're selling something. And that happens in the streets of Manhattan. Or it happens everywhere. So, and almost everyone on this TikTok agrees. So I'm reading this, Strangers in Paradise, and we get this sort of nebbishy character here. Where is he? This guy right here. And one of the Parker girls, there she is over there. He's staring at her chest. Well, at least I think she's a Parker girl. I'm not quite sure who. But they're in some beach resort somewhere, and she just starts hitting on him. And my brain starts going, look for the scam. Don't fall for it. Look for the scam. Don't fall for it. And he's just like, what? But she's like so charming and pretty that he, of course, falls for it and gets scammed. I found it funny that coincided with me seeing those two TikTok videos this week. Yeah. And I was like, oh my goodness, the guy didn't look for the scam and he got scammed. And he got scammed hard. But at least half the guys in the TikTok video were like, I start looking around, see what's up. What about you, Wilson? When a strange woman comes up to you, do you start looking for what the angle is?
Again, being in Manhattan, you automatically think, okay, yeah, what's the scam? Or it's like, okay, where am I located in Manhattan? Because there's certain areas where it's like, oh, this is a call girl, or a woman of the night, or what have you. Because that has happened where you're walking on the street and all of a sudden, you're getting complimented on your shoes. It's like, why? Yeah, I was dressed up nicely that day for an event, but it's like, who's paying attention to shoes? It's like I understand that's the starter of the conversation, and let's go somewhere to talk. It's like, no, that's automatic scam. To the point where, like, being a New Yorker, I was in California once, and I walked into a store, and I did not expect the lady behind the counter to be as friendly as she was, saying, "Good morning, how you doing? Here's a smile," and all of a sudden, what's going on? Again, I'm in the store. What's the scam? Is they trying to sell something extra? And it's like, no, it's a completely different mindset.
Ed Murr and John Bly. I can remember a couple of friends of mine. I can remember walking out of stores in Manhattan in like the 90s when they were young, wearing some expensive coat that they really couldn't afford. And they're just like, I don't know what happened. The sales girl was so cute. They both did that at least once. They're like, oh, she said I look good in it. And they spent like $200-300 on a coat. And this is the days where we were making like $90 a day. How about you, Paulo? What goes on in Portugal?
Usually they have great terms on a credit card.
Yeah,
they're in malls.
Exactly. No woman comes up to men and just hit on them. It doesn't happen.
They never have a man pulling the trick. It's always a woman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They know how to get our attention. Well, it was funny that happened in the Parker girls. We go, no, don't fall for it.
But the person hawking car insurance at the mall, that's a guy.
Yeah.
Because nobody believes that a woman is good at protecting your car.
There you go. Interesting. Oh, and I have a few topics this week that I ran into over the week, and one of them happened to be with Tim. We'll switch subjects to the Joker. Too bad. Well, Tim will have to catch this later. And it wasn't anything Tim said. It was Tim did a video last week about he was just kind of linking, the Batgirl movie getting canceled with. Do you remember that Batgirl Joker cover that got pulled about 5 years ago? So again, I think everything was about 5 years ago. Remember that Batgirl Joker cover that got pulled? Well, Tim used that as his thumbnail. And for some reason, me looking at that made me finally realize. First, I've said it many times before, I'm not a fan of the Joker. He's overplayed. But it wasn't until I was looking at that thumbnail, it struck me that one of the reasons I don't like the Joker is that they've made him the hero of the Batman story. As I've said before that it's annoying that Batman can never beat the Joker. No matter how many times he defeats the Joker always comes back. So Batman is like impotent against the Joker. Then I realized that the Joker is now that's a bit Seinfeld, isn't it? Everything is 5 years ago. Yeah, it could be, but that's the way human. Like we'll discuss that in a minute. First, we'll discuss the Joker. I realized that you can look at Batman as a force for order, and the Joker is a force for chaos. And chaos always wins in that situation. It doesn't matter if Batman thwarts any individual Joker plan. The Joker always causes chaos no matter what. And no matter how many times Batman puts him away, he's always back to cause chaos. And I also realized Joker's the happy one in that situation. You never see the Joker sad. Even when he's like in prison, he's like happy-go-lucky, chaos-causing Joker because he's the winner. And I think that's one of the reasons people respond to the Joker. And think about it. It's like they made a movie of the Joker. He's the hero. And I haven't seen the movie, so I can't really talk about. But he's clearly the hero of that movie. You don't make a movie about somebody who's not the hero of that movie.
Right.
And if you think back to even the Heath Ledger Joker, which once again I only saw the first 5 minutes of the movie and couldn't take it and turned it off. No one ever talks about that as a Batman movie. Oh, everybody always talks about Heath Ledger as the Joker in that movie. I can't even remember who played Batman at that time.
Christian Bale.
No one even mentions Christian Bale in that movie. Everybody always mentions Heath Ledger as the Joker. So the Joker
complain about the voice.
the Joker has become the hero of the Batman story. And once again, can you imagine Marvel and the MCU making a movie about one of the villains?
Well, they did Venom.
That wasn't them.
Right.
But it's like, and Marvel's villains, they always have to, if they're going to make some sort of story about the villain, they always have to redeem him a little. Like Magneto went from 1970s thug Magneto to Chris Claremont noble Magneto. So Marvel has reformed villains before, but that's sort of a different thing than making the Joker, who is a villainous agent of chaos, the hero of the story. So that's why I think that I don't like that the Joker Batgirl cover. I never liked it. It never struck me. I think one of the reasons now looking back why I never took to that cover is because the Joker is the hero of that cover. And because he's the agent of chaos. And he triumphed in that story. He triumphed over Batgirl, his chaos. Her Batman and his order lost in that case. He got to paralyze Batgirl. And, she eventually became heroic out of it, but not at that moment. At that moment, it was the Joker who was the hero of that cover. Because they have, in fact, made the Joker into a hero. In a weird, twisted way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Order is an absolute concept, and all it takes to ruin it is just a drop of chaos. And the Joker's got more than a drop of chaos.
Yep.
And he always because I thought about all the scenes. Have you ever, all the scenes you've ever read about Batman going to Arkham Asylum to do something, and the Joker is there. The Joker's always happy. He's having a good time. Even though he's locked up in the asylum, he's like, whatever. Because he knows he'll be out to cause more chaos.
It's a very interesting take on it. I never even thought of it that way, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it never struck me that way either until just this week. Nice Orwellian shirt. Yup. We've always been at war with East Asia. One of my favorites. I have to get a new one. Everybody's picking up Black Sod. Like I said, I found that talking too much. I need a mint.
All right. So let's take a break and go to what books did I pick up at some point. This one is a brick. So I'm going to imagine that I must have put a few of them together when I put them together like this. It's not
one of Wilson's
impossible
mystery purchases. He'll go to the store, buy comics, and leave them in the bag for a year.
For at least a year, if not more. I think the last bag was before the pandemic. So
she's a sociopath. But at least they reformed Harley Quinn. Usually, that's what you do before making a villain a hero. Is you reform them. They haven't reformed the Joker. They've made him crazier. What's in the magic bag?
All right. So we have.
Let me get you big so you can show off the covers.
Okay. So we have Symbiote Spider-Man. This was by Peter David, I believe. Greg Land. They were telling stories about Spider-Man in the black suit. That's why I bought it.
So there were flashback stories, like.
Yeah, telling the story of what happened while because during that time the suit would kidnap Peter's body and have adventures.
Okay.
I think the story is about one of those adventures.
If he'd actually
Uh,
read it, he'd know that.
if I read it exactly, I'm just going by what I remember. The reason why I bought it, which could possibly not even be the story at all. It'll be a surprise when I do read it. DC's Deceased.
That's the DC zombie book?
I believe so. Yes. Absolute Carnage.
Okay.
And then this gives me more of the time period, Marvel Comics 1000.
I remember. That's a couple years old, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So this would have been. It's so hard to find the indicias
Oh,
in
they
these
hide
things.
them.
2019.
Oh, wow. Those have been in that bag for a while.
Yes. This is, I think, a freebie that Midtown gives out.
I remember getting that one.
I don't know how I got two, but I got two.
Because-
A True Believers.
Spider-Ham.
Spider-Ham.
I think I skipped that one. I don't remember.
Yeah, I picked it up. I remember buying the original book.
Me too.
At a place in the village called Rogers Comics. It was on, I think, 17th Street, and it was a place that you went up the stairs, and it was like, again, it's Manhattan, so at one time it had to be an apartment building, and then it was converted into a store. So that was out the same time Peter Porker Spider-Ham came out. I got 2 copies for some reason. One to keep and one to sell, I'm going to imagine. A True Believers #1 with Spider-Man and Mysterio.
Ditko. Yep, I got that one.
Ditko art there. Oh, look at that. Usagi Yojimbo #1.
All right. They're up to issue like 28 now, or 29, I think, just came out.
Well, now I could catch up now that I got issue 1. I got 2 copies of that one again. I'm thinking these were all bought at the same time, only because here's another Absolute Carnage. So I think this is issue 1, and the other one I showed before could have been issue 2. House of X was, I think, that crossover event that was starting at that time.
House of X, Power of X, right?
Yeah, something like that. So I think this is they were out already because I have quite a few issues of it, or because they had variant covers.
Oh.
So here's one.
You were even buying variant covers in 2019?
I was even buying variant covers back then.
Wild.
Dawn of X, but I think this is the
intro, right?
The Marvel's preview book type thing. So because it says free on it, so that most likely came from that. Symbiote Spider #2. So I'm guessing these issues were out already for a while because I even have issue 4 here. So I must have been in the shop and just picked them all up at the same time. And a variant cover for that one as well. And again, that time period, he was dating the Black Cat.
Mr. Variant cover.
Yeah, look at that. That's a Ron Lim cover.
Oh, okay.
All right, and those were the books that came out back in 2019 or so that I bought and then decided I'm going to go put it in a bag and I'll read it later.
And never read them.
Yep, September 2019. So the thing is that the more books that I'll pull from that pile, I'm pretty sure they're going to get older as we go along.
A lot of Spider-Man, huh?
Yeah, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I know if I was ever to go back to collecting comics on a monthly basis, it would have to be Spider-Man to bring me back, which is what kind of happened previous months where I'm going back to. So I'm buying the current Amazing Spider-Man that John Romita Jr. is working on.
And there'll be a new Spider-Man coming out, I think, October?
Yes, a new series that has a Mark Bagley cover, I believe.
Dan Slott and Bagley will be doing it. Let's see. Check out the channel Call Me Chanto on the Man-Child versus Woke. It's hilarious. Okay. 62 Left Feet Blues with a recommendation. There's the word I'm looking for. My brain stopped as I was looking for a word.
I wonder if these free digital comics are still available. I don't know. Offer expires 7/1/20.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering too if has CGC ever come out with a policy on if the sticker is missing or not? Is it considered complete if the sticker is not on the digital? I still haven't heard word
I
of that.
haven't heard about it. Haven't read about it. I do know they're kind of in hot water currently, or not hot water, but there is some stuff going on right now because they approved a comic book that Marvel did not approve. I haven't gotten the whole story, but
I think
apparently a comic shop or a comic convention offered a Marvel comic with their own cover, but
right,
they physically stapled the cover
right,
onto the comic,
yes,
and CGC approved it.
and no, it's an acetate cover. I saw something about that. What it was, it wasn't just. Matter of fact, thank you TikTok again. I'm being thanks to TikTok, I'm being able to keep up with like what young people are buying in comics.
Mhm.
That's like I've never had a window into that before.
There's a TikToker that I follow named Naj, and she's really deep diving into what's going on. I think she even contacted CGC to try to find out because she's a huge collector
She
of the CGC books.
she may have been the one. What it was she was showing some videos where there. Matter of fact, I think there were 3 comics, and from what I can tell, they took a regular Marvel comic. I forget which one, like may have even been the first appearance of Miles Morales.
I believe so.
And I do it.
Ultimate Fallout, I think it's
Right.
called.
I've made my own sketch covers where I take some random comic, pull the staples, wrap Bristol around it, and put the staples back in, and draw and make it my own sketch cover. Chris Girusso does it a lot too.
Right. Those are called, I believe that's marriaging, isn't it?
Yes,
Or marriage is when you
when you take like a cover from one comic and staple it onto this, I'm just putting my own, Bristol around it. But with that one, they put acetate around it. I don't even know if there was art on the acetate. I don't remember. But they called it like the Ultimate Fallout 4 acetate version or something like that. And there was 4 different ones. One was a Deadpool. One was I think there was 3 different ones. Not only did if they did that, no one would have cared. But what happened was they sent them into CGC, or CGC had something to do with it. But in the CGC census, you see the acetate versions of them, and one of them is a 10. 2 of them are 9.9s. And then there's a few 9.8s. And everybody was like, there's a 10? There's a 9.9? Because they never give out those grades.
right.
They're like, how did a comic we've never heard of get a perfect 10 at CGC? And that's what started everybody being suspicious and going, what are these comics? And the woman on even she took a picture of the acetate one they had, and it's got the same UPC as the regular one. So that's how you know they married the acetate with the issue themselves. It wasn't an official Marvel release. So that was the big controversy that was going. Not only how did they grade them so high, but what are they? They started being called counterfeit comics. And eBay made somebody take an auction down because they don't allow counterfeits.
Right.
Looks like Wilson likes bombastic Bagman Spider-Man.
As a matter of fact, I do. I had bought some extra Marvel Legends to make one myself, and just as I'm getting ready to make a custom one, Marvel announces that they releasing one. I believe it was a Target exclusive, and I think I have that as pre-order.
Where was that from?
Okay, so when Spider-Man got rid of the symbiote costume, he was in the Fantastic Four building, and so now he's naked, or he's in his underwear, hiding his face, and it's like, what am I going to do to get home? Because they removed the costume.
Right.
So Johnny gave him an old Fantastic Four costume, and Fantastic Four doesn't have masks, so they put a paper bag over his head. On his way home, he had an adventure or two. Because, he's Spider-Man, he still has to stop crime. He doesn't have his web shooters. He's just jumping from building to building when something happens, so he leaps into action. Johnny also put a kick me sign on the back of him. So that's all part of the aesthetic of the bombastic Bagman. He's appeared as an alternate suit in many of the Spider-Man video games. It's an unlockable suit.
I remember the visual of him with a bag over his head, but I didn't know where it was from.
Yeah,
I don't keep up with
Ron
Marvel.
Friends was drawing it.
All my Marvel or DC that I keep up with is from the internet. I just hear what other people have to say about it. Jared's going to get eaten by giant bees before the night is through. Motorcycle maybe duck. Where's that coming from?
Bees on motorcycles?
My surprise comic of the week, Love Everlasting #1. This is the Jenny Frison cover. And it's by Tom King and Elsa Charretier. Charretier is the artist, with Matt Hollingsworth on colors. And I really liked this art. It's got, let me show you some of it. It's got a Bruce Timm, Alex Toth, what's his name? Parker Books. Oh, Darwin Cook feel to it, so she must have come out of animation too. But she's a very good storyteller. And the art is just terrific. It reads better even than it looks. Some art does that. It's like when you read it, you're like, wow, I'm really blown away. More than just by looking at it. But terrific first issue, and I'm not 100% sure what it's about, except there are 3 short stories that are done in the style of old romance comics. And it's done seriously, too, in terms of it's not like tongue-in-cheek romance comics. It's actually kind of well-written, but still romance comics. But throughout the 3 stories, the lead character is the same woman. And she's starting to remember what happened in the story before. So, like in the second story, all of a sudden she'd be like, what's going on? Who is this guy? What happened to Dan, my husband? And by the third story, she's like, huh? What happened to the other 2? Who's this guy? But that's only like briefly in this, so I'm not sure exactly where it's going. But I really liked this first issue, especially the art.
The cover is amazing. It does look like a classic 50s Marvel cover.
Yeah.
Romance book, I mean.
It's not like she switches to a different trope, but she switches to a different sort of romance era. Like the first one is clearly a 50s romance era. And then we get, a 60s romance era in the next one. And the last one is a Western romance era. So I guess it is switching trope, it's switching eras of romance stories. But I very much enjoy. This is one I picked up on a lark because I liked this. Well, I flipped through it and liked the art, and I picked the cover I liked best. But really happy with this one. I'm definitely going to get approved by the Comics Code Authority. Oh, they've got a real Comics Code stamp on it. Paolo, I picked up Who Shot Lucky Luke in English translation this week.
Really? Look, I've never been a fan of Lucky Luke. Although some people are liking these new Lucky Luke books because they're not done in the traditional style. And Who Shot Lucky Luke he also uses the artist's personal style. But yeah, and never managed to like. I do like the dog.
Who does Lucky Luke, and what is it about?
Okay, so Lucky Luke is one of the oldest westerns in Belgian and French comics. It was created by the artist Morris back in the 1950s. For a long time, it was written by Goscinny, the co-creator of Asterix, but it was always Morris's baby. He's dead now, but before he retired, he had already let other people handle the art, and now the publisher is doing different art styles, see if they can get other people interested in it. It's always been a humor western. All the characters are cartoony, and Lucky Luke is the fastest gun in the West, faster than his own shadow. His horse is the smartest horse in the West, Jolly Jumper. Then, for some reason, he always keeps attracting the attention of a dog, the dumbest Rantanplan, the dumbest dog in the West. For example, Lucky Luke will have a bad guy cornered, telling him to drop the gun, and Rantanplan will walk up to him. Oh, there's my friend Lucky Luke. I'll surprise him and jump into his arms.
And is Who Shot Lucky Luke sort of a parody of Who Shot Liberty Valance? I wonder.
I'm not sure if the story's like that. The thing is, because Lucky Luke is the fastest gun in the West, nobody should be able to outshoot him.
Bang bang, Lucky Luke.
Yeah, there was an animated series. It was produced in Europe, but there's an English language version. I'm pretty sure that the voice actors are British actors doing American voices.
Wow. And here's an interesting thing I read this week about Mile High Comics. From, I don't know if you guys subscribe to Chuck Rosansky's newsletter. It's just, you go to Mile High Comics. If you buy anything there, you can subscribe to the newsletter. You probably just subscribe to it anyway. You could always find Lucky Luke and Asterix in our school library. The French part of Canada would insist.
Well, but they get I know they got the UK editions in Canada. It's a bit more difficult to get distribution for European comics in the United States always. Yeah.
But anyway, 20 years ago, when I first bought from the Mile High Comics website, I remember him talking about his inventory system and how much time and money it took, because he was looking to his business plan was looking for people. The French ones, correct.
Mm-hmm.
He was looking for sort of mid-range comics to sell to people. I remember him describing it as, there's a lot of people who want the comics that dealers don't bring to comic shows. Like, there are certain comics that, they just don't, that dealers don't lug to comic shows because somebody once every 10 shows is going to want it. Those are the comics he was going to sell because of his software. People could go to his. This is like 2002 Mile High Comics, when all this internet was still pretty new. So he could always tell what sold by looking at his software, and he'd have his guys out there at conventions pulling out just kind of those, Hulk 187 or something, just some random issue, not even that popular, but and for years that was his selling strategy. Then I noticed his prices and now everybody complains that Mile High Comics are so overpriced, which they are. I've gone back there too, and I've been like, wow, these things are really overpriced. And he was talking about how 4 or 5 years ago, he changed his whole selling strategy. Since everyone can sell comics on the internet, and it's not 2002 anymore, everyone sells comics on the internet. eBay or whatever, and they're just blowing them out at rock bottom prices. Kind of like if you're just a guy trying to sell comics on the internet, you're selling them for super cheap on eBay or wherever. And he's like, he finally decided he couldn't compete with that. He has too much cost, too much overhead. So he decided his plan was going to be he wanted every back issue in stock in perpetuity. So he just started buying up lots and lots of stuff, and he raised his prices up because he's like, I cannot compete on price with some guy in his living room selling comics on eBay. So he was just since he couldn't compete on price, he was going to compete on the largest availability of those comics. You know, his back stock.
Right. You don't have to look for them. You know that they're there.
Right.
So,
And
you'll buy.
he said he also, if you're on his mailing list, and he said most of his old time customers left, and he understands that. And there was like two or it took two, and his business took a hit for like 2 or 3 years. It took him to get back up to the level of sales he was at before he did this new strategy. But it's been working, and he also gives if you're on his mailing list, he sends out every few months 40% off, 50% off, 60% off code words. So if you're a long time, buyer with his, you can still get 60% off. But matter of fact, that's why I'm always like, why are people buying these at full price? Those are the people, those are the newer people who are okay with buying expensive comics and want that comic now. So I found that interesting. I had not read he changed his strategy until I read that newsletter this week. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I had never thought that, he used to be the only game in 2002. He was the only, if you wanted to get, I don't know, all the stuff we buy at Lone Star Comics now, Journey, The Adventures of Wolverine McAllister, which I just bought back issues of at Lone Star Comics for $2 or $3 a piece, mycomicshop.com, because they have them. They were only $2 or $3 a piece. I could get them there. That's what Mile High used to be. But as he said, now he can't compete in that space. And now if you go to Mile High Comics, probably those, if I wanted to get Journey, The Adventure of Wolverine McAllister, they'd probably be $8 to $10 a piece if he had them. So I found that an interesting change in strategy.
That is interesting because then it explains a lot to when I was invited to participate and join hipcomics.com.
Mm-hmm.
And what I liked about them is that I could take my eBay store and connect it with them.
Right.
So everything that's on eBay, if you're on their site, on HIP's site, you could see the stuff. And what I like about HIP is that you could take a photo of your comic book and it'll automatically, because it'll recognize that cover, and it'll automatically start filling in information for you. It takes away the tediousness of it. So you could do a short box in a half an hour and have it up on there. Just the information alone that they already had. And the thing that I noticed is that every time I looked up a comic book to try to figure out, what is it worth? It'll tell me what that comic book is at on HIP. And I was seeing these books and it's like, these are Archie books. And they're selling for a lot, or they're being asked for a lot. And it's all about high comic stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, is this book really worth that much? Why is this? Because I know occasionally an Archie book will sell pretty well because of the content of the cover.
Right.
Not necessarily the interior. It's just that if it has something that has to deal with the cover that's a little shocking, revealing, if it's the girls in bathing suits, that affects the book. But as I was doing my research and going through eBay, where it's looking at the items sold, because these books aren't going for anything.
Right.
And I realized, the books that are being recommended at that moment of time when I checked were all Mile High comic books, High Comics. And it's like, that explains what I ran into a few weeks ago these weird price hike. It's like these books cannot be going for that much, and then some are. Like I end up selling Spider-Man #1 McFarlane one, I think a gold cover for like $25, and it's like, oh, that's cool because I had it sitting on my eBay, and it never went anywhere. So again,
Mhm.
it's one of those things where it's like it's weird trying to figure out prices and stuff like that. And yeah, there's a lot of people just selling books and stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot. That's why you can't compete on price.
Yeah.
Mile High has some 20 million comics. If it burned to flames, it would probably severely impact price. That reminds me of another thing that was in one of his newsletters when he was talking about the flooding in Kentucky. Was it Kentucky or was it before? Flooding in the United States, I forget which place. And he was like, every time I see something like that, I think of the comics. He's like, he's like, when you have that much flooding in a place, he's like, I estimate in that flood 100,000 comics were destroyed because people had all their possessions destroyed, and there's a certain amount of comic fans in that certain area that get flooded. So and he's like, that's why there's fewer and fewer of these old comics. Flood, these natural disasters take out a lot of, and a lot of people keep their comics in their basement, and that's where the floods hit.
Yeah. Or you don't even have to have like a major flood as people have accidents happen in their houses.
Yeah. Well, he's just talking
There's
about it all
but
going in, like 100,000 comics at once was
one,
probably
yeah.
destroyed at that flood. So I found that interesting too. It was kind of like, And he also said, I can remember him saying, in 2020 when all collectibles exploded because of COVID, and for whatever reason, people started buying collectibles like crazy.
Yeah, from what what I read is basically you have people who aren't going on vacation, so that
Yeah,
money is not being spent. They're not traveling to work, so
right.
again, money not being spent. They started buying collectibles, and artwork has been going crazy with prices.
He said during that period he couldn't keep his prices high enough. Everything would sell out immediately. I was like, wow. No matter how high he priced it, it would sell out immediately. Key issues and stuff.
Right.
I was like, wow, that's kind of nuts. Like I said, but I found that change in his selling tactic to be really interesting. Nothing I had thought. Have you ever used mycomicshop.com, Wilson?
I'm sure I have.
It, it,
I've ordered from everybody at one point or another. I do remember getting the newsletter because I did buy some kaiju comics from Mile High that I was looking for called um oh, the name escapes me. Mike Wolf had a set of comics in the 80s when he had a comic book imprint called Ground Zero Comics, and he had a giant reptilian monster. And it was like when I heard about it, it's like, oh, I've never saw those. Let me go find them. And I was only able to find them at Mile High.
now,
And I bought the stuff.
mycomicshop.com is Lone Star Comics.
I'm almost sure I've ordered from them as well.
They're good. They're really good. Like a bunch of us on YouTube order from them. They're really good at sort of obscure indie comics that nobody wants. I'm sure they're good at regular mainstream comics too, but and they're fairly cheap for the like obscure indie comics that love my comic shop. These days, I seem to be looking things up on the daily basis and cart constantly filled, ready to go at a moment's notice. Yeah, they've
I
got a
know
lot of.
when I do search for stuff in general, it's usually their site that will give me the information that I'm looking for, whether it's like trying to figure out who worked on an issue. So I've
Yeah.
used them more for research than
Ah.
actually buying.
By the way, what you can do about a fire in a comic shop or bookshop? Not water. They'll use water. Doesn't help you. They're
Yeah,
they're trying to save. They're trying to save structures. They don't care about the contents.
right. Of course, foam doesn't help either.
Nothing helps. Nothing helps.
You can tell the fireman, can you hold off on the water until I save the comic books?
Here is another idea I had. I was thinking about this. I was thinking about a lot of comic stuff this week. When Sleepy Reader did a video on the John Buscema Artist Edition. I did a video on it a month ago too. But as he was turning the John Buscema pages, he was commenting on how much he liked, the art and the layouts and storytelling on it. And he commented something about how nowadays he thinks the artists think more about the overall page, the design, than the individual panels and storytelling. And that got me to thinking about how pages artists do design. Do you remember, I've talked about this before, saying especially like Marvel art, since artists have been so devalued that sometimes what's going on in the art isn't really what's going on in the script. They've got kind of not jarringly so, but sometimes there's a disconnect, I think, because no one's really paying attention to what the artist is doing. The editors don't see original boards anymore. They don't see original boards with lettering on them. So they see the script come in. They see the art by itself. They probably don't even see that many penciled pages. I don't know how many pencilers, how many guys don't ink their stuff these days. So they see art in a whole different way than you used to when John Buscema was doing something. So now what I think it is artists are designing pages like they're more concerned with how the overall page strikes you than the individual storytelling in each panel. Because how the individual page strikes you is how the editor sees it at first. And that's how they get their work. So if the editor goes through the pages you handed in, like I said, he's not reading them. He's just seeing them without just the art. And he's just flipping through them. And I guarantee you they're not trying to follow the storytelling of the page. They're just looking at the individual pages on their monitor, and it either strikes them or doesn't. They're not actually reading the comic. So I think that's one of the reasons artists have moved towards making the initial look at that page very striking, because that's what the editors respond to, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm guessing they're looking at a JPEG from a server, and they're more looking at, the page was turned in.
Mm-hmm.
And they might even just be looking at the thumbnails, and it's like, okay, these pages came in, moving on, because I think and again, I'm only going by information I heard of years ago that you have to turn in a certain amount of pages so you can get put into the big machine to eventually get paid for those pages, because you're not vouchering at the end of the project, you're vouchering as groups of pages are coming in.
Yeah.
So, the artist is, I got to turn in 5 pages by Friday. This is what's getting turned in. And if you're looking at them as a JPEG and that looks good, you can move on to the next thing. I would imagine that is true, that you're now drawing for that stamp size image.
Yeah.
Because again, it's a lot quicker to look at a JPEG. This looks like it. Move on. Traffic it to the next artist, which is the colorist and letterer, and moving on.
I think that has changed how artists design pages. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, I don't know. Nice to see back issue price and demand increasing. Yeah, strange that DC sales haven't dropped like a rock. Marvel to a less degree. Back issue pricing demand. Yeah. I think Marvel and DC have a certain amount of fans, and they're still buying new comics. And there are some young people buying comics, as I found out on TikTok. It's amazing.
There are new fans who started reading when Bendis became hot, and they think Bendis is a good writer.
I don't know if you can be called a new fan anymore if you've started with Bendis. He's been around for a good 20-something years.
They started reading with New Avengers, so that was after Ultimate Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago, but they're new last 10 years fans. Although it's kind of funny to think of new fans as arriving in the last 10 years.
We got Chris.
Because everything moves everything moves the stories move at such a slow pace. It takes too long for them to get anywhere.
With TikTok, as Gareth mentioned before, what's interesting is that there are a lot of people asking for recommendations. So there are new people coming in, or at least what I can see from TikTok, because the group of comic book content creators there are always doing recommendations of their books. So there's a want for them.
Yeah. Those obscure titles are absolutely the reason I go there. They've got incredible stock, like Jared said. The prices for most of it, that's on mycomicshop.com. We've got an echo coming across since Chris came on. What do you got going on there, Chris? Anything different in your setup?
No. Maybe if I lower the volume, it won't pick it up as much.
Okay. How are you doing tonight?
How's that for echo? Well, now you're just going to hear my voice.
Speak,
no
Wilson.
echo.
Let's hear.
Me?
Say something, Wilson.
Hello.
Wilson,
Good to
say
see
the
you, Chris.
alphabet as loud as you can.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Yeah, I still hear it.
Getting a little bit of echo from Chris.
Yeah.
Face your speaker in a different way.
Well, it's off the iPad, so there's no.
It's off the iPad. That's weird. Why would it be doing that?
Want me to use my phone?
Is your microphone on the iPad too?
Yeah.
That is strange. You want to try it with your phone? We'll see if we get rid of that echo.
Let's see if I can put my headphones in here.
If I can put my headphones in, it should.
Yeah, your headphones should.
That might be able to work.
Take care of it. Hello there. I'm laughing at myself.
Oh no, that's still gonna get an echo. That just means I can hear. Oh no.
No,
you won't get an echo.
It should cut off the outside speaker.
Yeah,
Alphabet,
I don't
Wilson.
hear it anymore. A,
Wilson.
B, C, D, E,
Start
F,
from letter
G.
M, please.
M, N, N, O, P.
I think we're okay.
Yeah,
All right.
it works.
Technology, right?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
It will destroy us all.
Seen a lot of YouTubers attacking big company editorial staff. There seems to be very poor decision making at that level. But are modern editors really getting stupid? No, I don't think they're getting. I think people just like attacking Marvel and DC.
There's a perception that they're just being traffic managers.
Yeah, there is that. I have no idea. I have no idea how smart or stupid a lot of the editors are these days. But also, I don't read Marvel or DC, so.
Yeah, but in the past when we've had editors like rewriting stuff, people are like, "Hey, that's not their job."
Oh, there have been plenty of stupid editors.
That is their job.
There have been plenty of stupid editors when I was I don't want to say there's no such thing.
Although in sports journalism, if the editor has to rewrite you, he complains about the extra work. You're supposed to turn in a good written piece right off the bat.
I think Brian Michael Bendis is just taking orders from his managers. Everything Naomi, I don't think it's his artistic direction. Just a corporate goal. Could be. We never know. They are letting
him do whatever he wants and trust his sales levels not to change things. Although at DC, he's not burning up the charts at DC like he did at Marvel.
No. Mind the hey, I've seen girls reading comics in Cornhub. By the way, Chris, earlier in the show, I read your the letter you got from that guy discussing his Amazing Fantasy right off the shelf. I found that very interesting.
I feel like it was kind of. I feel like it was kind of like you were doubting. Like, did Stan Lee? I mean, just because he had the soap, did that really make any?
I wasn't doubting. I was trying to figure it out.
No, you were. Listen to how this guy's story changes. Let's cut to a clip from 3 weeks ago, please.
What that letter allowed me to perceive was to understand was how readers were perceiving it. And being only one letter, it's anecdotal. But if we extrapolate reader behavior,
that's still interesting.
We finally see. We have evidence of a reader responding to the not novelty covers, but the way that the covers are designed and Marvel Comics as a way of attracting them, because they have no way of knowing that these Marvel Comics are new. They think they're new because they don't know the heroes, and they are writing that. But it looks like Kirby really did the trick.
Yeah, the logo design too. As he said, he loved the logo.
Yeah, that he mentioned logo.
Last week I did show an image which appeared in the 1962 annuals, and it was cross promoting all the Teen Humor titles because they were the ones that had permanent characters.
Is that the 62 or the 63?
62.
62. Okay.
Yeah, it appeared in Millie the Model annual.
Right.
And it had Emily the Model, Patsy Walker, Kathy.
Was it that year that all the annuals had the ads, or was that the next year? I remember you.
In 1962, there were only 2 annuals: Strange Tales, and Emily the Model.
So it was 63 that all the annuals had those ads, I think, because that was in the site, the Marvel Minutia site, I think.
Yeah.
You sent us to,
Yeah.
So I think by 63 he had it down where he had all the annuals had ads for all the other stuff.
But then when he starts having the superheroes, he starts having the advertising inside the stories.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you can see that even by 1964, because Doctor Strange already walks around the Spider-Man's campus, school campus.
One of my favorite bits in this was him saying he saw Amazing Fantasy 15, but he wondered what happened to Amazing Fantasy 1 through 14, because that had a completely different logo than Amazing Adult Fantasy, which he was also buying.
I guess he didn't figure out it was the same title.
Yeah, we're gonna have to find more early Marvel readers and get their reminiscences of.
Well, it's not going to be easy. I'd like to find the readers that I started reading with the monsters. I like Fin Fang Foom or Gugam, Son of Goom, or stuff like that. Even before Fantastic Four #1.
Yeah, like I said, I'd like to hear more. And
I would like to find somebody admitting that they were reading Patsy Walker. Because Patsy, besides Strange Tales, Patsy Walker and Millie the Model were the best sellers in the Marvel line before they started using the Marvel brand again.
She was around for a long time.
Yeah, this was from 1945, and after the implosion, each of them had 2 titles. So even with the title limitation, they wanted 2 Patsy. Goodman wanted 2 Patsy Walkers and 2 Millies.
Wow. He knew what sold. What are you working on tonight, Chris?
I'm helping a buddy out with a comic that he's doing.
Okay.
He's done like stuff through Kablam before.
Okay.
And then he's trying to fill out pages, and I was like, "Do you have anything like this, or like, do you have any fake ads?" And he did have a fake ad thing. He had 2 pages of like the Hostess Twinkie fake ads. Yeah, I have these, but they're not in color. I was like, well, then color him.
Con.
But he's like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, yeah, Photoshop. He's like, yeah, but I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, all right, well, So I'm kind of looking at what he colored, and I'm basically gonna be the Jared to his Chris of 1997.
Okay.
1998.
That reminds me of one of my favorite Ricardo Montalban lines from Star Trek, the Wrath of Khan, where they like lower Khan's shields, and his number one goes, Khan, the shields are lowering. And Ricardo Montalban just looks at him completely deadpan, serious, goes, well, raise them. He pounds on, he goes, I can't. I just like, Khan, the shields are lowering. Well, raise them. I don't know if that line has stuck with me all these years. Have you read any Patsy and Millie, Paolo? For me,
not yet. But there is a certain there's a certain period that I'm interested in. Starts around late '63, early '64, because they started having full-length stories, and Denny O'Neil was one of the regular writers on Patsy, I believe, and Millie the model started having more drama. The characters were portrayed as adults, still young, but they were adults. So there's a bit more drama in their relationships, and in trying to make sure that the modeling agency they work for survives because they have money problems. And in Patsy Walker, she and Hedy Wolf, they graduate high school, and then they start they get into the adult world. They start working as secretaries, and Buzz Baxter goes to Vietnam, and then he comes back shell shocked. And there are a few issues dealing with that, and I would actually love to see all of those reprinted and in a trade paperback. I think they do from interesting reading. Yes. Here's the thing: Stan knew that he wanted to write the best-selling comics even before the implosion, and those were Patsy and Millie.
Yeah, I don't know if they still have the stats for Millie the Model because they destroyed all the romance comic stuff.
And I don't
Stan
know
Lee
if it
was
was
very
ever
good at
reprinted.
writing. What was that?
I don't know if they were ever reprinted. Was there a reprint series for those?
Yeah. I just know I don't know if you noted it was around 2003 2004 when Ike wanted to shut down the warehouse in Arizona or something. So he was digging through everything, or he had Corey Settlemeyer digging through everything, finding out what was in there, digitizing some. They were trying to digitize some of the film and stats of their old stuff, except for the romance comic stuff, because I was the guy doing the digitization or the cleanup on it. They farmed it out to somebody who had some technology where they would scan in old film. Then I'd get the old film and have to match it up.
Here's one thing: could we trust Corey Settlemeyer to say, even if he ordered to get rid of those two, instead of throwing it out?
Well, it wasn't him.
Okay.
I think we could count on Corey.
Yeah, we could count on Corey.
But is he? I know he's a historian, but is he a pure historian, or is he too superhero minded?
I think he's a pure historian.
He's a pure historian, down to the point of being that I had to recolor some of those books, and I was limited on how many colors I can use.
I bet you could get him to come on and talk.
I don't know. I haven't spoken to him in so long. I don't even know how to get in touch with him.
I might still have his email.
But anyway, it was one day I walked into this one room at Marvel when they were on 40th Street, and there was an intern with a paper cutter cutting up old stats. And I was like, and being that I hadn't seen these stats before, and I was the one who was working with the film. I was like, "What are these? What are you doing?" And he's like, Jemis decided, or I think it was either Jemis or Ike decided that they wanted to destroy all this stuff. It doesn't reflect well on Marvel. Old romance comics. I don't know why old romance comics didn't reflect well on Marvel.
Yeah, I would say that was Ike. That wasn't Jemis.
That's what he was chopping up. Yeah, I think it's Ike too. I really have no memory of the name he said, but it must have been Ike.
You'll remember that they tried to revamp Millie as a tennis player or something during that weird epic line where they put out the Trouble comic with
Double Trouble.
Yeah,
but that was Aunt May and Peter's mom.
There was a thing called 15 Love.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, but that since that was like a Bill project, I don't see him destroying that film. I would say that anything to be destroyed was coming from Ike because he just did. If it was costing the company money to store it somewhere, he wanted it destroyed.
Yeah.
Bill
or sold on eBay.
Or sold on eBay. So, I don't see Bill doing that at all, or even caring for something like that. And I would say no, Corey would have probably printed those books if they even got to him.
Yeah, they wouldn't get, like I said, if they have the intern destroying the stats, they don't exist. Just a few millies available in Marvel Unlimited. Okay.
So the only place you can read that stuff is read comics online.
Yeah. It's old scans of them.
Yeah, but I think we can safely say that if you try to put out even an omnibus, just so you can get it all out of those Patsies and Millies that were made after the implosion, they wouldn't sell that well. No. I remember they tried to do. Every time they try to do the monsters, they never get to a second volume.
Right.
And and when they tried doing essentials of the westerns, there was one Rawhide Kid and nothing else.
Right.
So I don't think the fan base is out there, and not everybody thinks of comics like me, wanting to have that just because it existed once and to have it once again. If you put out a new Two-Gun Kid comic, it's not going to sell. So if you put out a collection of old Two-Gun Kid, even the old superhero fans who are now in their 50s and 60s, they wouldn't care about the westerns and the romance.
No. Well, even Eric Larson with Savage Dragon says that people always ask him if he's going to put out hardcovers of the entire Savage Dragon. He's like, no. It's like the first 3 will sell well, and then they won't. By the time I get to volume 7, nobody will care, and it will lose money.
Then just plan to do one.
Yeah. Take the money for the one. Why not?
Make a hardcover with the first 250 issues of Savage Dragon.
Well, Todd McFarlane's been putting out those compendiums of 50 issues of Spawn. He just came out with a third one, soft covers.
You know that ultimately Dave Sim and Wendy Pini understood that they couldn't put everything out there and maybe make a profit. So there was a time when they created websites. Both of them created websites for their respective stuff for Cerebus and for ElfQuest, and you could read everything there.
Right.
And for Eric Larson, probably that would make sense if it had a site where here read everything that I made on Savage Dragon, because if he's not going to sell hardcovers or trade paperbacks with the old material, he has no way of monetizing. But if you would like whoever still reads those comics to reread, or even new people who still might want to take a look at Savage Dragon, here's a free comic with 250 issues. Go get it. It's free.
I think there's such a resistance to that. It's just so counterintuitive, is what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the guys who do web comics, they don't mind. They have everything, and they still put out there's
That's because all their revenue comes from advertisers.
not necessarily there's some from
The
merchandising.
successful ones, yeah.
Yeah, the successful one for merchandising, and even they put out collections of their material. It's all available online.
They do.
There
but
are people who like to have everything in paper.
if you're
And we know that sometimes the websites, the creator gets tired and doesn't want to do it anymore, and the websites disappear.
Yeah, but if you're a successful webcomic guy, you've got advertisers. That's just the way it is. Everybody else is struggling. Ask Chris. He's got a webcomic. How rich are you, Chris?
I'd like to announce the sale or the availability of my first NFT webcomic is now available for sale. It's not an NFT. It's a comic about an NFT. You'd be buying the original art, but I've priced it at the very sensible, popular NFT prices. The first one right now, it's available for sale on my website right now, chrisderusso.com, for $10,000.
All right.
Do you take Bitcoin?
No, it'll just be regular U.S. money. My vendor is PayPal, so you can use a credit card through PayPal if you want. I do not take Bitcoin or crypto.
Or you can get a comic about his first comic about NFTs.
Here it is. You'll get this original physical piece of art.
Hold on, let me go solo layout for you. There you go.
Oh, so it's like an NFT you could hold.
It's an NFT. It's an NFT comic. It's an NFT comic, but it's not an NFT. I can't stress enough that this NFT comic is not an NFT, but you can buy it like an NFT, and that it's quite a lot of money that you'll be very proud to have spent.
There you go.
Only $10,000 right now, and prices are projected to rise in the next week or so. So the value is just going to keep increasing until somebody buys it. So
I think you should try to market it as exclusive world first, physical NFT.
Look, I'm not trying to take advantage of people here, okay?
Okay, no, I get, but it would be an interesting joke.
So it's a forever NFT, non-NFT.
I think the market for omnibuses has become very vigorous, and people like Larson may not be up on what's currently going on in the marketplace. Could be.
Well, he's aware of where he fits in as far as popularity of the Savage Dragon versus Spider-Man.
Yeah, there's a lot of Omni completists now. I don't think there's a lot of Savage Dragon Omni.
Yeah, like he puts it.
Right, but
his convention bio one time they asked him for a bio, and he's like, Eric Larson has spent the last 25 years writing, penciling, and inking the Savage Dragon comic, but fans still tell him that he's their favorite Spider-Man artist.
There's one
I'm
thing
your
about
fan. I loved your Spider-Man.
Yeah. It's like people. It's like John Byrne to me is Fantastic Four John Byrne and the X-Men John Byrne is not whatever it was that he was doing at IDW John Byrne.
Star Trek John Byrne.
Well, I did buy Assignment Earth. I did an Assignment Earth miniseries, which I found to be very good. But the Eric Larson did a line of it was the Savage Dragon archives that were like essentials, and I bought the first two. I know I ordered the third. It did not never arrive to my shop, and then I let it go. The one thing that annoyed me is that Eric never used the covers as chapter breaks. So everything just keeps going and going and going, and you want to stop. Where do I take a break?
I know what you mean.
But those had about 25 comics each. If he did omnibuses, they would have to have about 50 issues, and they would be about 1,000 pages, a bit more, maybe 1,100. 12.
Those are gigantic.
So, but for omnibuses, that's nowadays that's a normal size.
Right.
So by the time he gets to his comic to issue 300, he would have material for 6 omnibuses, and that's not too much for omnibuses buyers.
Could be. Omnibus, the London.
because they would be 12 essentials,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually you start not paying attention. But with omnibus, it's different.
Yeah, people
Still-
like oversized hardcover, even if they never read them.
Yeah.
Speaking of hardcovers, I got this for my birthday. I read it originally on Hoopla. This is the Warren Ellis and Jason Masters 007. I've talked about this before. I read this one again this week. It is just really good. This might be after the Ian Fleming novels, this is my favorite James Bond thing. I just think it's really well written. I like the art. And what I noticed reading it this time through is the climaxes of the stories have the best art, because a lot of like the first half of the stories take place in office buildings. And he does a fine job drawing the inside of office buildings. They're just boring. But when we get to the first climax takes place in this dark and shady, I don't know, warehouse or some sort of industrial building. But there's like tons of shapes and shade and blacks and James Bond sneaking, and it's really well done. The same thing with the second story. A lot of office buildings in the beginning, and then it takes place in a car chase and in this fancy house. And the best art is like in the last issues of the story. So I think that even helped with the climax of the story. But I'm not a huge fan of the James Bond movies, so there's not a lot of competition for me for James Bond stuff besides the Ian Fleming original novels. But this was really terrific. Take it out of your local library or read it on Hoopla if you can. I've double dipped on so many things in omnibuses. It's doubling your money from your biggest fans. Yeah.
If you buy a trade paperback, you're a smart. But if you buy an omnibus, are you a smart?
No, I don't think. You mean an asshole, like the sucker and the asshole?
Yeah, I was trying to use wrestling lingo. I'm not very good.
Nah, okay. I don't think you're an asshole if you wait to the omnibus, because you're waiting a long time. Though I did just get also the Jack Kirby Devil Dinosaur trade paperback. I used to have the oversized hardcover of it, but it went out of print and rose up in price so much that I sold mine. And I just got it back in the trade paperback version. So,
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. In color? or
Same
black and
stuff,
white?
only dirt cheap. What was that?
That in color?
Yeah. I don't think Marvel puts out anything in black and white anymore.
They don't do the essentials anymore?
No, they don't, because they've got the Epic collection. They haven't done the essentials in about 10 years, I think. It's been a while. But that reminds me, do you remember late 90s, early 2000s, the first time they put the Jack Kirby Fourth World stuff in trade paperbacks, and they didn't put it in color?
Yes.
I bought the New Gods one.
And they
I
put
got
it
them
in
too.
like in grayscale, basically.
Yeah, it's like they took like the magenta plate or something and printed right from that in
Yeah.
black and white. It was really weird.
It was weird. It was such a disappointment to get that
Yeah.
and look at it. And it's like, oh, like, did they not have it in just solid? I would rather it be solid black and white than whatever they end up giving us.
I think they thought there was that little interest in the Jack Kirby Fourth World stuff that they didn't want to spend a lot of money putting out a trade paperback of it. How times have changed. Now they've got 9 different versions of it in all sorts of different formats. But the first time that showed how little faith they had in that selling. It's kind of crazy to think about.
But it's also kind of like when we were talking about Marvel putting out something that fans are not going to want.
Right.
And the thing is that I'm sure that there's a fan out there who would want Millennium Model traded together. But the problem is there is no film. We know
Right.
they destroyed it. and they're not going to pay any money to really do anything to get it. So
Well, we
they're
don't know
gonna-
they destroyed Millie the model. They just made
Okay,
him.
so we're not sure what they did.
We're not
destroy,
sure. We know they destroyed the romance stuff.
the romance stuff.
I'm
Okay.
not sure. I'm not sure if Millie the model counted as that. I don't know.
I don't know, but then what they'll do is that they'll scan it in for a comic book because they've done that before,
Right.
but not pay for that to be cleaned up, so it'll look like it's scanned in from a comic book, and they'll say, "See, the sales were bad because nobody wanted it." It's like, no, the sales were bad because you're putting out a crappy product
Right.
because you decided to destroy.
That's happened before.
Which because they've done it so many times. I was there when they told me like, "Oh, what are in these CD cases?" It's like, "These are all our books." It's like, "Oh, well, now we have them digitized. You could get rid of the CD cases." And it's like, "Yeah, but when an editor needs something, it'll take 5 minutes for me to pull out that CD and give it to them, and not the 6 hours to 2 days for it to be requested to be sent upstairs and get off a tape." That's what they put it on. They put it on tape, and it's like, well, now we could get rid of these.
Well,
It's
that's
like,
right. The tape backup days.
The tape backup days. And it's like, oh, that was the big thing, and the Marvel Dam was the huge thing that this is so important. And it's like, yeah, okay, great, but it's quicker for me to get that CD and give, in the conversation that we're having, the editor would have been back with the CD already.
Yeah.
Than you telling me to throw these out. So he's like, yeah, throw these out. I said, okay, sure, I will. And I never did. And I kept using them, until the day I left. I should have took those with me because I would even get emails after I left every once in a while going, do you know where this might be? And it's like, yeah, it would have been here if it's still there.
You say, yes, I do, for $200.
Uh-huh.
Which is what made me believe that Roy Thomas story that wasn't true. I've told this one on here before, right? Do you remember ever hearing a story at Marvel? Because this is one of the stories that went around. That when Roy Thomas was editor-in-chief at Marvel in the early 70s, they were cleaning out, once again, they were cleaning out a bunch of, this is why I believe that story too, because stuff like this happened. And they were cleaning out a bunch of stats, which Roy Thomas said, okay, as editor-in-chief, he's like, all right, clean out those stats. And then Roy Thomas, as the fan, said, I'm going to take those stats home. So he took home the stats that Marvel was getting rid of. And then, a few years later, cut to, Marvel needed the stats, so Roy sold them back to him. This is the story I heard at Marvel.
I've heard that story as well.
Cut to around, well, did you hear that one?
I've heard it before, but the problem is the chance I heard it on your show.
Yeah, could
way
be.
back when I was listening to it. So
but I finally got to meet Roy Thomas like 5 years ago. I was hanging out with Bob Wyachek at a con, and they sat Roy next to us. And I was like, Roy, I heard this story. I have to know if it's true. And he was like, stats? I had nothing to do with stats. That story's not true at all. I never had anything to do with any stats. I was like, thanks. Just wanted to know, but because sometimes you hear these stories, and I'm like, I don't know if I believe it or
well, let's say he had done that.
Yeah.
Does that make him look like bad in any way?
I think it makes him look clever. And
Well,
like,
maybe-
there's always guys saying, "Get rid of the CDs."
Let's ask me about something I've done.
Huh?
Anything. Like, let's say, think of one story about me that you know is true.
One story about you that I know that's true. I heard that Chris Girusso used to scan in his mini Marvel strips at 1200 DPI.
No, I didn't.
I heard that. That's true.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I had nothing to do with scans.
So are you saying
believe him.
Roy Thomas lied to me?
I'm saying it's possible.
It is
I'm saying
possible.
the possibility
think-
never crossed your mind until just now.
No, I think it's more possible that
hey,
I heard a story
hey,
that wasn't true.
Wake up, Jared, and let that sink in.
Wasn't
Let me
that
let me
reporting
get
job?
this straight. Let me get this straight. No.
But when Roy was editor, wasn't that reporting's job?
Yeah, it could have been, probably. Like you said, he had nothing to do with stats. The editor-in-chief has nothing to do with stats.
Have you heard this story? Like, this is another story that's easy and fun to believe, but there's no way to confirm this.
Mm-hmm.
About man, what's his name? What's his name? The guy, he looks like baby. He looks like Uncle Baby Billy from the Righteous Gemstones. Ever watch that?
I don't get your reference.
You're making
You
up
picked
stuff
the
now.
most obscure reference I've ever heard.
Okay, Righteous Gemstones is a modern television show on HBO
Okay.
with Danny McBride. And
Let's narrow down who the guy is: an artist, an editor, a letterer.
the Nick Fury, Agents of Shield.
Oh, the actor,
No, the writer, the artist.
Steranko.
Steranko. Jeez, how old am I? So Steranko at one point, this is as the story. Have you heard? Hey, have you heard this story about Steranko?
There have been a lot of
that?
stories about
There's
heard
been
one?
quite a few. The my favorite is the Bob Kane one.
Yeah.
The story I heard was he called up the Marvel warehouse and said, "Hey, Stan Lee says that Jim Steranko's coming by, and you need to have all of Jim Steranko's art packaged up and ready. He's coming by to pick it up later today, so have it ready for him." And they went, "Oh, okay. That's what Stan Lee says? Okay." And then he just showed up, and they had it for him, and he picked it up.
Okay. That's
Now
an
that-
easy one to believe, but
I don't believe it. I don't believe that it was possible to locate art in Marvel's warehouses, physical, in one day.
no, Marvel's Warehouse, when it was in Brooklyn, it would have been, so it would have been easier to do.
Let's get
Marvel's
Steranko on the show. Why don't you get Steranko out on the show?
Well, if we pay
on-
him, he will come.
He's on Twitter.
He
No,
is. In
Just slide
those days, in the 60s, Marvel's Warehouse was in Brooklyn, and they interacted with them all the time, I know.
That makes it entirely like more possible. Like let's just say maybe he didn't say have it for him in 2 hours. Maybe it was like he's coming in Friday,
Yeah.
and they gave him like a week or something.
Trade paper. This is why Sleepy likes those omnibuses, because trade papers backs fall apart and have gutter law. Some of those omnibuses are so big they can have gutter law. Will the older Marvel romance hit the public domain? Then Yo could put them out. Who knows? I don't know if they will. Or
Not if it only if it was published before 1951, and Martin Goodman somehow forgot to renew copyright before the 1976 copyright extension kicked in 1978. There are a few people out there who claim that because Charlton forgot to put out copyright notifications in some 1960 Blue Beetle comic, that Blue Beetle's in the public domain. That's total bullshit. That was not that had not been the case for years, because there's been jurisprudence regarding the Superman newspaper strip. Because back when Siegel and Schuster were still trying to get the rights back, and one judge said that the DC had let it lapse into the public domain because they forgot to put copyright notifications on the newspaper strip. And while that may have been true for 1938, forgetting to put one notification in one strip does not invalidate all of the physical issues that had Superman stories in them. So that decision, well, by that judge was reversed. The copyright stood. So even if they hadn't amended some part of the copyright law, and I'm not an expert on it, but to say that say that the copyright was automatic upon registration, because I don't know exactly when that happened. But I know that's been the case for decades. If you publish a comic, or if you publish a book, if you publish anything, it's copyright. It's for sale.
Yeah.
It's copyrighted. One way to guarantee that the copyright is recognized is you send in the 2 copies for the Library of Congress.
Wow. PS Books are reprinting Blackhawk somehow.
Some of those qualities have not been renewed.
Who's
Mhm.
PS?
Were you saying something, Wilson?
PS
Yeah,
Books.
who is PS?
PS.
PS Books? They must be
PS.
one of the publisher. I forget who they are.
Okay.
There's a lot of people publishing, like, what is this one? It could be these guys. This is the Craig Yo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is Clover Press. This is just some stuff printed from old comics. But it's neat that they actually have some of the original art for the covers. Where are they? A couple of them, they still have the original art for the covers that they printed. I thought that was wild.
That's cool. Yeah.
From deep in someone's collection. But nope, that wasn't Pia. That was Clover Press does a bunch of those reprints too. Clover Press is the one publishing the Great Gatsby adaptation that I've been buying. That I still don't have issue 5 of. It hasn't come into my comic shop. See, the last comic I got for the week was 8 Billion Genies. Number 4 of 8. This is the one where all of a sudden everybody on Earth gets their own genie and has one wish. And in this one, we get to see, all the people who wish to be superheroes, including the 12-year-old boy, are all out there fighting the people who wish to be supervillains.
Yeah.
And we find out a little bit about the genies and the overall plot. It turns out the genies are a fail-safe mechanism. Let's see. DC had a Blackhawk book during New 52, so I figured they would still have the copyright. They might have the trademark. Copyright is actually different.
But the Blackhawks still came out through quality. If the copyright was not renewed, those pre-DC books are in the public domain.
Right. You won't necessarily have the trademark on Blackhawk, but you'll have the copyright.
No, you can have the trademark on Blackhawk. If the comics that came out before 1951, because at the time the copyright was good for 28 years and had to be renewed for another 28. So if the 1976 copyright extension made everything that was still in copyright stay automatically renewed, plus the additional 19 years that Sonny Bono came up with.
Mm-hmm.
That laws from 76 to be applied from January 1st, 78. So 20 minus 28 years up to 1950, they could still have forgotten to renew the copyright.
Mm-hmm.
Because quality went out of business in 57. So everything that they put out before that, before 1950, it was not renewed automatically, it would lapse.
Mm-hmm. Well, we found out in this a little bit about the genies, how they're like a fail-safe mechanism for when it's like when the human population gets so big that everybody wants something and everybody's wants conflict. These genies pop up and give everybody something they want, and it always ends up thinning out the human population. So that's what they're there for. They're there to give people what they want, so people will thin themselves out. And it turns out this guy who was the bartender in the first issue, who made the wish that nothing in the nothing about these wishes could affect anything in his bar. He's the last genie from when the last time this happened. So the last person who makes a wish, that last genie gets to live with the humans until the fail-safe mechanism is triggered again sometime in the future, and genies show up to give everybody one wish.
Now, you said the last genie. Once the genie grants a wish, does something happen to the genie?
They disappear.
They disappear. Oh, okay.
That's why there's a count in the beginning that says how, or it's on the title page, where it says how many genies are out there and how many humans are out there. So let's see, where'd it go? So it gives you, like it started out with, 8 billion humans and 8 billion genies. And then it goes down slowly. Oh, here it is. After the first 8 weeks, the human population is 1 billion and falling, and the genie population is 550 million. So lots of people have died from these wishes. But it's been a fun book.
Yeah. That I think I'll pick up as a trade.
Yeah, it'd probably be a nice trade to pick up. A nice trade to pick up, like James Bond, pick up as the collected edition. It's funny, who's this by? Dynamite is one of those companies I don't buy a lot of their comics. One of the reasons is I don't think they make good single issues. Like, they seem to have the minimum amount of the pages, no editorial content, no anything giving you, no little Stan Lee making you feel like your family. It's just, 22 pages of comic and 8 pages of ads, or 10 pages, whatever it is. And it's like, I've always kind of been turned off by their individual, and they also do a ton of licensed stuff I'm not interested in. But it's kind of like some companies I feel just don't give me my money's worth for an individual comic. Maybe it'll be your money's worth for a trade, but for an individual comic, I don't think so. So that's always something that comes, that's why I pointed out in Samurai Doggy, not only was it, I could feel it was thick, 48 pages, but they give me a map. That map made me go, all right, a map. And then usually Aftershock gives you little bios too. So these are the two artists, the writer and the artist give you a little bio. So that the bios it's not quite editorial content. But I like my comics to have a little editorial content, probably because I grew up with Marvel comics and that sense of fun.
So you feel like you're a part of the
Right.
process, kind of a thing, and I get that.
Yeah, and like stuff like Mind Management Bootleg that I got last week, that had all sorts of fun stuff. It not only had the lead comic, it had a backup comic that was a little mini comic, and it had fake script to a Mind Management comic. It was, how sometimes companies put the script in the back of a comic in some special edition or something. He
Right.
had like 5 or 6 pages of that, except it wasn't a real script. He just made it up. Sleepy Reader sending me a message. Chris, I'm trying to pick up some of your back catalog. Is there anything you're proud of? Easy to get? Recommend? Chris, leave us.
Yeah, I heard a phone chime, so I think it went to go ahead.
Well, I'll give you. This is his Image Comics stuff you can pick up. They're digest-sized G-Man stuff. Issues 1 to volumes 1 through 3. I don't know if it's still in print, but if it's not, you can probably pick them up on Amazon or eBay. When did this come out? 2013. Volume 2 came out. Like I said, there's a volume 3. He also
Chris
did,
used to sell it on his website as well.
Oh, okay.
Let me double check.
What do we got? Mini Marvels, Rock, Paper, Scissors. That's a collection of his Mini Marvel stuff. When did this come out?
Good question.
2008. So there's another collected edition you could get of Chris.
He sells it on his website.
Okay, which is Chris G Comics.
It's chrisgiarusso.com. I'll put it into
Okay,
the.
got that one too. chrisgiarusso.com. Since he's not paying attention to you, we'll have to. I think the last thing he did was one of those kids' journals, hybrid things. Here we go.
Okay, I'm going to send you a link to the YouTube.
This isn't quite a comic that he did. It's one of these Captain Underpants for young readers with lots of comics and text in it. That's been popular for the last.
If you want,
Ooh, you can draw wings.
You probably won't want to, but you probably enjoy listening, but you won't want to jump out. So,
Oh,
that's
he's
gonna
talking
go
on the
sometime.
phone now. We can hear him all of a sudden.
Yeah,
What's
then I'll
that?
call you back. All right, bye.
I was just showing off some of your books, Chris. See your question on the screen?
Some back catalog. Is there anything you're proud of? Easy to get. Recommend. G-Man is the stuff I'm most proud of. The first graphic novel is very difficult to find. Graphic novels 2 and 3, or you can get. There's a link at my website will take you to the only dealer that I'm aware of, other than like getting them used on Amazon. And then there's the Mini Marvel stuff. I don't know if there's like one giant Mini Marvels collection.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Nope. The
That's
Marvel
mini
Ultimate
Marvel collection.
Yeah, that was the first digest. But currently it's called the Ultimate Collection, I think.
Oh, okay.
Or is it the well, I'm great at this, right?
He knows what his books are called. Don't you worry.
The Complete Collection is what it's called.
Ah, the Complete Collection. I don't know if I have that one. I have Rock, Paper, Scissors.
There's Rock, Paper, Scissors, and then there was Secret Invasion. And then the two of them combined make this. I also forgot so G-Man's got 3 graphic novels, but it's also got this hardcover diary style book called the G-Man Super Journal, Awesome Origins. And the conceit here is that G-Man himself is the writer and artist of this book. That's what led me to doing the weekly webcomic that is now famously my first NFT comic. But if you want stuff that's more the mature adult reader, #danger.
That one's good. I liked that one. I missed the first issue of that, though.
#danger. Don't be fooled. I did not paint this cover. The cover is painted by, I don't have it off the top of my head. Richard Williams did all the covers, but the interiors are me. And there's cussing, so don't give it to children because then they'll start saying bad words.
Yeah, I try to
this-
put the link to his website on the comments, but I just realized.
Oh yeah,
YouTube
and
won't let
I
me
did a
that.
trailer. I did an animated trailer for #Danger too. So that's on YouTube. Which, I don't know how to throw a link onto here.
What was
Otherwise,
that
I'd do that
alien
right away.
one you did?
Encounter.
Encounter, that was it.
Encounter, my collab with Franco and Art Baltazar,
Yeah,
Franco and me. And then here's book 2.
Welcome to the team. What was that, Lion Forge Press?
Yes, sir.
I remember getting the issues of those.
From
They're in
Lion
my
Forge.
Chris Caruso section.
Yeah. #Danger from Ahoy Comics. Everything from Ahoy is pretty good,
Yeah.
and most of it is excellent. I believe #Danger's production guy might even be in here. Collection editor, Corey Settlemeyer.
Oh, look at that.
So we're getting closer. We can have him on next time.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for all the info.
You're
You
welcome,
email him
Goblin.
and tell him I want him on.
Okay, I can email him if you want.
Yeah, why not? We'll talk to Folk Hero Corey.
It's get all the deep history that he's privy to that most people are not.
Yeah.
I remember telling him that the artwork for X-Men #1 that was most frequently reprinted was wrong, and like he didn't know that. And I was like, yeah, man, that's not the actual print. If you've seen a real printed copy of X-Men #1, it doesn't have that extra like horizon background thing. And he was like,
I got very
yeah, exactly. Like I feel like most people would have been like, who cares? But he was like, oh no, okay, thanks for letting me know. And he got like, he's like, if you know anything, if you know any other stuff like that, let me know. So I was like, that's right guy in that position. That's the guy you want for the job.
Yep. Huh. That guy you want for the job. All right, well, we should wind up now because it's getting to the end of the evening. So anybody have any final words?
No, I think we covered everything.
Yeah,
only
the
Forgot
complete
about
Tales from the Con. Don't forget
Tales
that.
from the Con. A humor comic written by Brad Geiger. And this collection, half of the book is me drawing it, half of it is Scoot McMahon. And it's just fun examples of things at convention time or comic culture, because that's a free comic book day strip right there.
Woohoo! YOLO.
Why is Russell Gould selling a YOLO T-shirt? Well, the joke is obvious, of course, because Russell Gould keeps getting resurrected because of the Lazarus Pit.
Yeah, I believe the asterisk has your Miley Berry.
Okay.
Next Wednesday on the Graphic Man channel, we're going to have special guest Joe Corallo.
Oh, okay.
Talk about Archie.
Cool. I'll have to check that out. Okay. Well, everybody have a good night out there. Check out the Graphic Man channel Wednesday night at 8, right?
Exactly, for the 4-color fossils. I am the least fossilized fossil.
He's very proud of that. And everybody have a good night out there.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Good night, folks.
Bye-bye.